Former or current agents, what's something that you can tell us without eliminating us? Yeah, because everyone knows the internet is full of government agents with high security clearance just waiting to endow us with their secrets. My dad worked for GCHQ in the 80s doing voice recognition, and he can't say anything more for a decade more. The way they recognize you by Siri and Google today was being used in the 80s, it was just a bit slower. The CIA have different specialists, like any government branch: field agents, paper pushers, targeting officers, programs and plan officers, paramilitary officers, language officers, information resource officers, and the list just goes on. I'm available if you're looking for a middle-aged bullcrap artist. Not FBI or CIA officer here, but my sister is a district attorney, and over the years she's prosecuted a number of animal cruelty cases. This led to her having an ongoing partnership with the FBI for the last several years. It turns out the FBI started tracking such animal cases about 10 to 15 years ago due to the incredibly high correlation between attacking animals when you're young and becoming a serial violent offender as an adult. I work with the Australian Federal Police with the Spider Squad doing computer stuff for them in regards to predators and finding trafficking victims. It's the most heartbreaking work, but when you get them, the office looks like NASA after a Mars landing. I was an analyst, not an agent. 85% of all classified material is classified because of how it was collected, not because it's juicy or useful. Yes, your boss and co-workers said that crap about you. My great-uncle was an FBI agent. Every time we'd ask him if he had any interesting stories, he'd say he was sworn to secrecy. After 10 years of hearing this, my sister asked, "Really?" And he responded with, "No, I just don't remember anything interesting happening." I met an old, retired CIA spook at a wedding reception. Spitting image of Colonel Sanders. He was amazing. So I asked him, "I don't want you to tell me anything you can't, but I'd love to know, when Kennedy got killed, what was the talk around the water cooler in the office?" He didn't halt or pause to think, he just said, "Hell, we all thought Johnson did it." Haha, he certainly came off as really wanting the job, hating Kennedy after his passing, and having a real drive and ambition. As far as I understand it, it's still a non-zero likelihood in the opinions of people who study the event. My high school girlfriend worked for the National Reconnaissance Office after college. At the time, they were responsible for analyzing the nation's spy satellite photos. She told me two things. First, there's a special garbage chute for classified materials. It's in the hallway. When you're new, as a hazing ritual, they tell you you have to shout your badge number down the chute before throwing in any materials. That's hilarious. And two, she wouldn't tell me anything about the resolution quality of the spy photos, of course, but she did let it slip that because Russian sailors will sunbathe undressed on the decks of their submarines in the Black Sea, several women in the office would pin those photos up in their cubicles as cheesecake or, I guess, beefcake photos. So a few decades ago, US spy photos could resolve Russian male anatomy. Well, I can tell you we're all told not to write stuff on sites like this, and social media in general is pretty much a no-go. Brian Bendis, the creator of Miles Morales and author of House of M and a few other works, has a story about doing a talk at GBCI at Langley and being told to wait in a break room, not allowed to have his laptop, phone, his own notebook or pen, but he was supplied with a notebook when he walked in that'd be reviewed when he left. A young analyst walks in for coffee, sees him sitting there, recognized him as famous comic book author Brian Michael Bendis, and starts to react like a fan. He then pauses, starts sweating, and quietly asks Bendis if this is a test of some kind. If you go through the FBI interview process, it takes a while. Chances are you're going to have to spend some time working on crimes against minors, which is really tough and most people don't want to do it. Yeah, I heard a story on Reddit about how somebody was involved in a case against a predator, and he had to go through every image on his hard drive to bring up any potentially incriminating photos. The case drove him out of the industry. I can't even imagine. There's a book called Moscow Rules. It was written by two CIA people, all about, well, disguise. The CIA had all of these agents in Russia, but the Russians were insane about following literally every single American in Russia 24/7 looking for spies. So a huge part of their job was trying to shake off the KGB. They had crazy quick change disguises, all sorts of stuff. The movie Argo was based on one of the writers, somewhat. We have full access to Google's ad network. If we really want to track someone, we use that. I'm not a federal agent, but like, come on, there's literally an API in the source code for it, and you think it's not being used? An ex-company man once told me that Get Smart was far more accurate than James Bond. Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure being a famous spy is a sign things aren't going well. I watched the Daniel Craig films recently, and that's what stood out to me. Just how many people, especially the bad guys, knew Bond by name and appearance. Doesn't speak well for the 00 program. I worked with a woman who was former NSA. We'd always beg her to tell us stuff, but she never did. The one thing she did say, though, was that during training, they'll show them a video of a bunch of things they found out about and stopped. She said she hardly slept for 2 weeks after watching that. I have a relative that retired from the NSA a few years ago. She's talked about a few things in generalities and nothing specific. Among them are, you'll see things that entirely change your view of the world. People go in there all the time with lofty goals of changing things, and within months, those goals are mostly gone. Still, if you want to change things, you work for the agency. If you want to just make money, you work for a contractor. Nobody cares what contractors have to say. Most people will stay long enough and will do a tour in counterterrorism. Many people transfer out after a few months, and the average stay is 2 years because of the visuals. Those who stick around for a long time often change for the worst, and many struggle with mental illnesses, become alcoholics, get divorced, and generally lead miserable lives with their work being the only reason for continuing. Alcoholism in general is rife in the agency. When you cannot speak to anyone outside the agency about your work, it becomes nearly impossible to confide in anyone close to you. Even if you have close work friends or family, you have to be careful what you say because not everyone is read into every program. 2 people can sit next to each other in the same office, working on the same subject for months, and never talk about it with each other even though they're close friends outside the agency. So people turn to the bottle. Her husband worked for a different government agency and also had a top-secret SCI clearance, but she couldn't talk about work with him, nor could he with her, but his didn't involve the intelligence community. The agency employs psychiatrists who are cleared to be read into almost any program. Going to them, though, is often seen as a mark of shame among other agency employees, so they're not used nearly as often as they should be. She told me most of these things while trying to recruit me. She believed that I should go in knowing what to expect. I eventually declined to apply. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but a mentor who definitely wasn't supposed to tell me used to be a white hat for the FBI. Apparently all he did was search for predators by tracking adult movie websites. He said he didn't stay for very long because it was messing with his mentality. If you guys were wondering, he left to go join the Navy, became a nuke EM, but they pulled him out of the program because of his cybersecurity skills, and before I left our command, he was helping our CMC connect his computer to a projector. Sorry to put you on the spotlight, EM1. Operation Ivy Bells was a plan to top Soviet communication lines. The cover story they used was that they had divers diving down to recover fragments of a new Soviet supersonic anti-missile ship. The communication line tap was a failure due to a spy. However, the dive teams successfully recovered all the fragments of the missiles from the Soviet weapons tests. The US was able to reverse engineer one, and subsequently learned that they were radar-guided only, and the assumed infrared guidance did not exist. Yeah, you'd like to know what accounts belong to the FBI and CIA agents, wouldn't ya? Yeah, well, it is a little hard for us to verify some of these accounts, admittedly. That is one of the downsides of user-submitted stories. Also, I wonder if doing this is putting me on some sort of list just for saying the words FBI over and over. If I can trust that she's telling the truth, there's an old lady in town who was in the FBI back in the 50s and 60s. She said Nikita Khrushchev was a short man. 2 family stories from me. My father's uncle told everyone for his entire life that he worked at a button factory. It was only revealed after his death that he in fact worked at a missile factory and assembled the gyroscopes for the guidance in missiles. And then we always knew that my grandfather worked for the government at the Pentagon. We never knew what exactly he did, but every 6 months or so he'd call up to talk to my mum. The conversation was pretty much the same every time. My mum and grandfather would catch up for a few, and then it would turn into, "So, I have another clearance upgrade coming up. You'll probably get a call like always. Just wanted to give you a heads up." Surer than anything, a week later, some government agency would call up, it was always a different one, and they'd ask for my mum. They'd ask a bunch of questions, and that would be that. When he died from Alzheimer's, at his funeral, 4 men in black suits attended, and nobody knew who they were. After the burial, they approached his window and handed her a plaque with 17 government agency symbols on it. Turns out he was responsible for inter-agency cooperation and training. He basically got everyone to talk to and teach each other. Now his son works for them, doing what? We don't know and we don't ask. I have worked with and know guys in intelligence. Most of the intelligence we get is from OSINT, open source intel. They do news articles, press releases, news networks, and government announcements scouring. Most people think that everyone in intelligence is some sort of James Bond or Jason Bourne type of individual, when in reality, the majority of analysts sit at a desk and go through news articles all day. That said, that's not the only method we have to gather intel, but this is where most of it comes from. Even analysts that are using other methods such as GeoInt, IMINT, and SIGINT spend their days cropping images for minute details or replaying and monitoring the same signal over and over. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I once rented out my old farmhouse to a family. They paid the rent every month, and other than not mowing the lawn to save their life, I didn't think anything bad about them. That all changed when the DEA called me to inform me that my renter had been murdered in Mexico and was asking my permission to search the property. Well, it turns out I'd unknowingly rented my house to the Mexican mob, and they were using it as a safe house. It all fell apart for them when two of them got caught with a duffel bag full of crystal. My renter had to go back to Mexico to visit his mother and was promptly unalived. Let's just say I no longer am a landlord and never will be again. I'm not with any service, but my friend is. She went off the grid after she graduated college and got recruited by the CIA. She told us she was interested and majored in political science. I hope she's doing well. Want to work for them? Prepare to do a fair amount of paperwork. The form will ask for each of your former employers' contact information of friends, your history of addresses, and they'll then send an agent to interview a number of these people. Next, you have to take a psychological exam and be interviewed by a psychologist. Finally, you'll have one last interview with a polygraph and a professional lie detector. Intelligence work is really boring most of the time. I talked with some CIA recruiters towards the end of college and almost applied earnestly after a large group Q&A and then a much smaller one. The thing that stuck out to me was that the guys said most CIA agents are out of shape and have limited combat training with weapons or hand-to-hand. They made it clear that it's the military that uses force. If confronted, they were trained to immediately surrender or to drop their bags and run if possible. My sister's an intelligence officer who was assigned to a Special Forces FOB in Afghanistan for a period. She had to go through a gun qualification course and failed. This meant she wasn't allowed to carry a firearm while deployed. The instructor told her she was one of a very select group so bad at shooting that they could not pass, and then jokingly gave her a knife to carry. She spent deployment doing whatever she does, some sort of analysis, and then hanging around the gym so she could watch the buff Special Forces guys lift. 95% of individuals can be uniquely identified using as few as 4 spatiotemporal points. If you apply for a job at GCHQ or MI5, MI6, Filingdales, or the others, they'll talk to every member of your close family, and if any minor red flags come up, you might not get the job. And also, if you're Chinese, Russian, or North Korean, I think it probably goes to a grandparent or great-grandparent being from that country, you won't even be able to apply. My source? My stepdad was in MI6, and fun fact, if he wants to go to certain countries, like Israel, he has to ask permission from the MOD to travel there. Just so you know, people, there will be a case file opened in order to investigate and document this internet video. Am I on the list? It's a harmless question. Well, you can FOIA your FBI dossier to find out, though that definitely puts you on another list. I've done this. It was really disappointing. A single piece of paper with my name, addresses lived, places of employment, and known group memberships. Whoever put it together had a sense of humor, though. After noting my association with Discordianism, there was an F-Nord snuck in there. My conclusion is that the people who work for government agencies are the same kind of nerds I'm friends with. Psst, don't tell anyone, but we spy on people sometimes. I mean, you literally want Snowden dead over this very publicly. When I applied for a clerical position with the FBI, someone on the subway unaccountably sat next to me and asked if I'd write her son and persuade him to apply to a school for the deaf. I'm deaf myself. How could she have known I was? The minute I sat down, I happened to catch her eye, and she's like, "There he is," and comes sits next to me. Come to think of it, I don't recall being photographed during my interview. It's just so weird. So I wrote a letter, she and I met for dinner, and then we went our separate ways. I've always wondered about this. So, does the FBI do this in order to check you out? I didn't get the job due to an old college debt, by the way. This is eerie. And given where you'd just been, it does seem like the most likely outcome, doesn't it? But then again, stranger things happen out of nowhere all the time in the stories we read here on the channel. I don't know. I've had a clearance, so I can weigh in a little. Two things. First, most secret crap happens right in front of people's faces under the guise of being normal, everyday stuff. Secondly, properly secret programs and operations are never named in any way that indicates what they actually are about. They generally just chuck two words together at random that would rarely come up in any normal conversation, stuff like cracked gorilla, which I just made up off the top of my head. So when people talk about classified stuff and its name is super topical, it's either very, very old or a nickname at best. Only public programs and operations have topical names as a PR motive, like Desert Storm. Maybe off topic, I had dinner with a bunch of pasty white overweight dudes interested in hiring us for some AI consulting. We knew they worked for the Defense Department, maybe Defense Intelligence Agency, but they couldn't tell us exactly who they worked for or what exactly they needed. At least not until we had clearance. At some point in the conversation, I asked the one buff-looking guy if he ever served in the military. He said he was a Navy SEAL. I looked at the other dorky-looking dudes and asked them one at a time. They were all former Special Forces guys. I mean, you'd never ever think of any of these guys being Special Forces. They all looked like regular IT guys. I don't know for sure, but my guess is that they were all CIA. I was in the sauna at my gym when this undressed old man with extremely long droopy bits started talking to me. Somehow the conversation ended up on the topic of my new roommate, who happened to be Saudi Arabian. He then proceeded to tell me he worked for the FBI and knew exactly who I was, and asked if I would like to make some money every now and again for giving him information. I said sure, not because my roommate was sketchy, but because he got drunk one day and peed on my couch. This was 10 or so years ago, and I never really heard from him, but I think my phone was tapped for a short span of time. Most of the job is agents talking about looking forward to retirement, time-waster trainings, whining about the crappy new guys or how the job has changed, shady hiring practices, new policies designed to maximize agent liability while letting the old skirt chasers retire with BS Lifetime Achievement Awards, and wondering how the Sam hell the current agency admins got to be in charge. By the time you finally get that amazing career case, the passion, skill, and dedication you had when you started out is long gone because the agency doesn't really care about you or any of the other cogs. The US Attorney's Office isn't interested in anything they can't win without absolute certainty. Two other people have written in and agreed with me, and I apparently agreed with me as well. This is more support than you will ever get from your admins as a federal agent. I have a few friends that are CIA officers. First thing is that the people that work for the CIA are not CIA agents, they are officers. The people they recruit to spy for them are agents. Also, going on a tangent, I'm 90% sure that I've been one of those agents when I was dealing with a Mexican logistics company while working at General Motors. The logistics company we were dealing with was owned by a multi-million-dollar Mexican clan, and all of the ultra-wealthy clans in Mexico all have ties to various cartels. So some federal agencies got involved, mainly FBI and I believe DEA, but one guy was specifically not wearing any badges and was not willing to identify what agency he was working for, and questioned me on a lot of specific details of what the company's capabilities were. Though getting back on track, anyone who's a US citizen can apply to join the CIA. It isn't that hard. If you have any kind of degree in computer science, statistics, engineering, or accounting, and don't have anything that would screw up you getting a clearance, getting a job would be relatively easy there. And, as implied with that previous comment, working at the CIA is far more boring than you would think. Lots of tracing manufacturing capabilities, from what I described with that Mexican logistics company, to finding out how China sources the components they use to manufacture their satellites. This is only kind of related, but my dad worked in SATCOM for the Army for like 35 years. Kid me thought satellite communications would be some kind of really cool, high-tech, important job, trying to find where the bad guys were or whatever. My dad, being a dad, when I asked him what he did at work, he said, "I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you, son." This was reinforced when he came home one day with a satellite image of our house. This was pre-Google Maps or Google Earth crap, so it was mind-blowing to me. When he actually told me what he did when I got older, it was mostly IT stuff and occasionally training new people. I imagine the majority of all the jobs at the FBI or CIA are similar mundane things. My father was in the Navy and ended his career working at the Pentagon. When the war started in Iraq, he'd flip out every time the news pushed the weapons of mass destruction narrative. Lo and behold, there were none. I had a customer years ago that worked for the FBI in a support role. Tech stuff. He wasn't an agent or anything. He signed up to coach Pee-wee soccer for his 5-year-old and met his assistant coach at the first game. Monday morning, he got called into his supervisor's office to meet with some agents. Apparently, his assistant coach was a well-known mafia boss, and they wanted to know everything he talked about. He was shocked because A, he had no idea, and B, that they did. Not an FBI agent myself, but I was recently in frequent contact with an FBI recruiter about open positions I was considering, and what they told me was that the process of actually becoming an FBI employee usually takes between 1 to 2 years for all the necessary background checks and training and exams. That the FBI does all the stuff you see in the movies, just not as quickly. As I was watching some X-Files the night before the recruiter told me that, you can imagine that spooked me quite a bit. Special agents aren't spies, they're cops, which is ultimately why I didn't decide to go forward with the application, since the initial info session made it seem like special agents had more of a foreign or diplomatic role than they do, which is what drew me in the first place. This was a test. You've all failed your security checkup. Turn in your badges and your guns. Oh, but Chief, I've only got 3 days till retirement. People with a confirmed low IQ. What's it like to be you? I was born with a severe case of hydrocephalus that no one caught on to until I nearly went full potato at 18, then comatose a few days after when I turned 19. Turns out all the issues that I had with learning things, memory retention, emotional maturity, that was all affected by the water pressure building up on my brain. I wasn't being a lazy slacker kid. I worked my butt off to pass my classes and graduate. I just couldn't process things well, so a lot of it was very difficult for me. In my haze of a memory during the first visit to the neurologist, it was determined that my condition was so severe I shouldn't have progressed past middle school learning, and most, if not all people diagnosed with the level of pressurization and compression of the brain as I was having, were in assisted living facilities just surviving as shells. After needing a second surgery a year later, my brain eventually started firing signals for mental maturity, but the process was still pretty difficult. I had to learn how I learned things best. Things didn't process the same way. I've also adapted to overcompensating to make up for the lack of intelligence. Didn't have the work smarter option most times, so I just worked harder. It's been about 12 years since the last surgery, and I've grown immensely during that time as a person. But the fact that I have to work harder to overcompensate is still a huge issue for me. We still don't know how off I really am because no one caught it early enough, and that's really an isolating feeling. IQ of 87 here. I saw someone else with a 90 IQ whose story was very similar to mine. Words just don't seem to click in college. My brain gets saturated after about 2 hours or so, and I can't remember any studying past that. There's no chance at studying the last minute, and it's weird to be the smartest in the family, despite my obvious flaws. I seem to have zero ability to think outside the box. It happens from time to time, and it's extremely satisfying when it does. But mostly, there's no creativity whatsoever. For an example, I played a guitar for years, and could never create a single original riff where my peers could after a week or so. My significant other paints very often and always wants me to try it. I never could even start a painting without a template. In regards to problem solving, in math I used the formula to a T. In language, I followed the writing rules and template on Purdue OWL. The only time where it's a problem in a real-world situation is weirdly physical work. I'll get stuck using the shovel the exact way I was taught without deviation and throw out my back while a peer would turn around for a better angle or use their foot to push it farther into the ground. Lastly, my working memory and comprehension is not very good, which is what an IQ test is based on. This means that when I'm literally at work in my retail job, sometimes I completely forget what I was doing or where I put an object a customer was supposed to get. What the narrator will note is that most of the comments he's reading, like the previous one, are quite well written and grammatically correct compared to a lot of what he has to wade through in this job. Just goes to show you that you never know what someone is working with in the old cranium, and that you should probably check your assumptions at the door. I have a global information processing disorder. If our brains were computers running at 60 frames per second, mine runs around 45 on a good day. Not quite enough to really be noticeable as it might be in some people with Down syndrome for the sake of example, but enough to lower my IQ and cause problems in my everyday life. I'm one of the lucky ones. I can function relatively normally, discounting my autism and the occasional epileptic seizure. However, I'm also fully aware of this deficit and how high my IQ could be. Talking slowly or getting annoyed because I've asked you to repeat something, or pushing me out of the way when I don't react fast enough, that's just rubbing it in. I can't change how well I process information. Believe me, I've asked my doctor about it and other people have tried before. I'm stuck where I'm at in this regard, and it's hard to try harder when I'm already running at 110% just to keep up with the rest of the world. I have an IQ of 90, which means below average. I sometimes see that other people can memorize and understand stuff faster than me. My triplet sister was born with a brain bleed and partial damage to her brain. We were all 3 months premature, and it happened to affect her more than me or my brother. She has a lower IQ and was put in the special education classes in 2nd grade. I'd never consider her to be dumb in any way. We have a very close relationship and we communicate very well. She looks completely normal and there's really nothing wrong about her besides her lower IQ. We live in a narcissistic household and she was obviously dubbed as the black sheep and was bullied throughout school as well. When we were younger, I also ganged up on her with the rest of my family because I thought it was normal at 7 years old. We've definitely gotten closer as we've gotten older, and we kinda stick like glue against the rest of our family. We're both very empathetic and kind, and a lot of my other family members are complete bullies, so we seem a bit out of place. She's doing well now that we've finished high school, and she's gotten a boyfriend recently, who seems very kind. She'll hopefully be getting a job soon and moving out by next year. It'll be funny to see her be the first one to move out because everyone said she'd live with my mother forever. I'm proud of her, and I love her. I was given an intelligence test in the 6th or 7th grade. A group of us were given it for some study. The person entering the data into the scoring matrix misplaced a decimal point on mine. They told my mother I had the IQ of a 5-year-old. It took a week for them to figure out the mistake. For a week straight, everyone treated me as different. I was the one who answered the phone when they called with the correction. My family still brings it up 20 years later. I don't know if I'm actually below average, but I have a learning disability. I'm ADHD and I always struggled really hard in school. I'd stay up all night studying my butt off only to make either a D or an F, sometimes a C if I was lucky. I mean, I really studied. I felt like as an adult it's been a bit easier to learn some things now that I don't have the pressure of tons of schoolwork and teachers assuming I'm lazy and telling me to try harder. I've taught myself how to keep a budget really well. I've taught myself how to start a reselling business and even track my expenses. I feel like I function all right, but I'm very intimidated by a lot of things that I'm supposed to do as an adult. Anything to do with taxes really scares me, because I'm terrified I'll mess them up somehow. I'm really shy in conversations because I have trouble pulling the words out of my brain to explain how I feel about a subject. If I'm writing out what I want to say, I can do it pretty well. But speaking is very intimidating. I have a lot of opinions on things and I love to learn different viewpoints on things, but I'm terrified of someone trying to debate me or have a conversation with me about any of those things, because I don't really know how to repeat anything I've learned. I just have it stored in my brain and can't put it into words easily. Basically, it's contributed to a lot of my social anxiety, and I have a major inferiority complex. I'm 30 years old and I feel like such a late bloomer in every possible way. My mum at my age was already married with 2 children and fully established in her life. I'm nowhere near that point. I'm just now learning the basics of being an adult. I feel like all of my 20s was an extension of my teenage years. I feel embarrassed of myself, honestly. I wasn't qualified for the normal school, but they let me go anyway to, quote, try it out. I remember the admission IQ test. I knew it was a test and thought there must be some kind of secret bonus answers, like the cube might fit in the triangle somehow, since the sides of the cube are smaller than the long side of the triangle. I'm not smart. There's quite a few times I miss what might seem like obvious details. Overall, I've done okay, though a lot of things have been more stressful than they should have been because I'm constantly second-guessing myself. That has been something that's occurred a lot to the narrator. Just the assumption that you aren't as bright as other people could probably be a major handicap to some. We're pretty well aware of the effect that confidence can have in all manner of activities, and second-guessing can really hinder our operating abilities. Going into something feeling like you might be too stupid to succeed is already a major hobble. One of my brothers has always had a slight mental disability. Maybe you could say below average intelligence. But the things he takes interest in, he often thrives with. However, he can struggle to understand things that others would consider almost common sense. He was never diagnosed with anything, or there was never a clear label. I think the worst thing my siblings and I were ever told was that he had some sort of mental disability. Because growing up, we were only 2 years apart. For a long time, we were best friends. Essentially, we were Irish twins. Suddenly, he had something wrong with him, and my siblings treated him slightly different, and so did I. We just assumed that he didn't understand things that we did. Almost similar to how humans treat animals. We are more intelligent and therefore superior. I remember when I was about 13 years old and my brother 15, we had a massive fight over something stupid. In retaliation, I said, "Well, at least I'm not stupid like you." He stormed off and locked himself in the bathroom. Immediately, I felt bad and begged him to open the door so I could apologize. I found him crying and he said to me, "I know there's something wrong with me, but I just can't understand what it is." At that moment, my heart broke. I realized how awful I was to have ever put him in such a box over some minor differences. Since then, I don't treat him any different to anyone else. My siblings still treat him differently to each of us, which is a shame, but it often makes me think, who is really the one with the mental deficiency? Because so what if you struggle with something? We all struggle with something. At the end of it, he's still my best friend and we have each other's backs through everything, and I don't trust anyone quite the same way that I trust him. We, as humans, put so much weight on intelligence. Although I think it's important to understand everyone's struggle, sometimes the worst thing we can do is attach a label or description which can completely diminish their intrinsic value as a person. So I'm writing this for him to just say treat everyone with respect and consideration, and suddenly things like low IQ or mental disability become obsolete. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have a low IQ, but I was never tested for anything else. My parents are actual geniuses, both have poor backgrounds but managed to succeed, and all of my siblings are smart as well. I had trouble following teachers and other kids in classes. It took way more time and more examples to figure something out for me. I never had the time to do anything else than study. I don't think I've had friends since kindergarten. I can't talk to people, I have trouble understanding most jokes in reasonable amounts of time. I never understood deeper any meaning in movies, songs, or books, even when someone explained them to me. The thing that really screwed me up most is the "you can do anything you want if you work hard enough" thing that we say to kids. Because it worked for my parents, and they thought it will work for me. And not just them, all motivational speakers, all teachers. I worked 10 times more, literally, than other kids, so I was actually pretty good in high school. I thought that uni was going to be the same. Just by going there and working hard, I'd get my degree. What happened was that I couldn't follow courses after the introductory stuff, and I somehow passed the first year but was kicked out after the second year because my exam results were so bad. I developed several sleep disorders, several addictions, and I'm in huge debt as a result of my 2 failed years in uni. I can't even get my driver's license. There are too many things on the road to keep track of. I'm not good at anything. At home, I repeated what we did in school and did my homework. It took me ages for things that other people found trivial. I don't care what I do. I would do anything I'm capable of doing and that pays me enough to rent my own room. I don't enjoy anything anymore. I used to read books, not for the enjoyment, but to better myself. It doesn't matter because I don't understand them and I forget everything in a few weeks. I'm just a parasite living off my parents' hard-earned money. Now I'm jobless, I can't even get a job as a janitor, and I genuinely don't know what I'm going to do. I had a job at a lumber mill for 2 days until I injured a coworker. I had a job at a restaurant, but I was fired from there, also because of my character. My dreams were just things that 99% of people do by default, like getting a proper job so I wouldn't depend on my parents, getting a degree to make my parents proud, and to prove to people that IQ was meaningless, learning how to drive, getting married, and getting kids. Now all of those things are impossible, and I have 50 long years of my miserable life to live. I have Asperger's. Please don't be rude when you have to repeat yourself. Do not expect me to get a hint. If I don't get it, break it to me gently. No car radio and talking at the same time. It's too much stimulus. I might appear to be angry in loud restaurants. Too much stimulus again. Am I doing something socially weird? Talk to me about it nicely in private. I probably didn't realize it was weird and I can stop. Please don't ditch me as a friend when and not if I screw up. At least try to talk it out. I was born with fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, have borderline personality disorder, and depression and anxiety. I'm a mess some days, but because I'm high-functioning, I have good days too. Sometimes it'll be a good day in the morning and a bad day in the afternoon, and vice versa. I need things explained to me thoroughly, and slowly sometimes or from a different approach. I've learned over the many 28 years to be exact, to voice that I need help or I'm having trouble understanding. A lot of people say to me, "You don't seem like you have a disorder, you look normal." That's only because I've been raised to know of my disorders and to ask for help when needed. I learned to read novels before I started school at 4. I just got things and excelled to the point that I was bored. Then I was punched in the head. In my 30s now, I'm still trying desperately to get into university but getting knocked back constantly. I can't retain information I hear and I'm slow to process it sometimes. I'm talking days. I'm really a visual-only learner. I'm poor, will never own my own house because I can't get a job that pays well enough to save, I have no friends and no connections. I can't help my kids with their math homework at all, so I feel like a failure. As a functioning adult, it's difficult because people expect so much more from us than we're able to do or give, which makes us hate ourselves even more. I'm very autistic and have ADHD and an IQ in the 70s, so it's kind of a mixed bag. I have a great memory for facts, so I did do well in grade school. I even got into advanced classes. But as an adult, I'm really struggling. I don't learn very easily and I don't take instructions well. I can get lost in familiar places. I can't play complex games and I get really confused by a lot of things, even normal things, like folding towels. I come across like an airhead and I can be explained to in children's terms how to do something, and it takes me at least 3 times every single time. And this isn't just every time I do something new, I mean literally every time I do it. It's very frustrating, because I'll say I'm not smart and people will be like, "No, don't say that, you're smart." But the thing is, I'm not even sad about being dumb. I have other good qualities. I'm funny, I'm pretty, I'm kind. I'm so sick of people acting like intelligence equals worth when that's not at all the case. I'm okay with being slow. Don't pretend I'm not just to make me feel better. Because what's going to happen is you're going to expect me to be able to do things as if I'm smarter than I am, and then you'll be frustrated when I don't. Pretty much the hardest part is when people, especially on Reddit, pretend intelligence is the only thing that matters when, in my opinion, it's maybe among the last things that matter to me personally in a friendship. And also, it's frustrating, because if you're a kind person who doesn't fit their drooling idiot image, people write it off as low self-esteem. And then whenever you act dumb, they think you're doing it on purpose to prove a point. Learning disability doesn't equal less intelligence. My brother scored a pretty high IQ, but has been diagnosed with a learning disability. I mean, a person can be great at school because they were great at memorizing and taking tests. That doesn't equal a high intelligence either. Learning disability might mean you need more help with certain aspects of learning because your brain processes information differently than an average person and not low IQ. It's occurred to me how many people of high achievement don't do well in the schooling environment. On the other side of the coin, I do wonder how many people have difficulties that don't necessarily affect their ability to test well growing up, but that really wreck things for them once they move on to life after school. And all of this without a diagnosis. I have dyslexia, dyscalculia, and ADHD, but an IQ of 120. It's known as the family curse. Above average IQs but lots of learning disabilities that make it hard to show. Everyone in my family was bullied growing up for being stupid, including me. It was hard for me to find friends because of it. My brother was beaten up regularly for it. I couldn't read until 4th grade, then I had a teacher tell me I'd never do anything with my life. That day I started spending all of my free time learning how to read just to give her and the world the middle finger and prove that I could do something with my life. After that, while I got good grades, I was still seen as stupid or lazy. I had to work 5 times as hard on everything I did just to keep up. I'm in college now and have accommodations for the first time, which really helps but also draws more attention to it. I had a friend tell me, "You know, college isn't for everyone." I found out later he was making fun of my intelligence with other classmates behind my back. I stopped talking to him. Is it all bad? No. Having to work extra hard for everything in school has seeped into every part of my life. Now that I have accommodations, I feel like I'm unstoppable. At my college, I'm an honor roll student going into geology, president of the STEM club, founder and president of the board games club, part of the student leadership council, and sometimes the college lets me call bingo numbers at events. I love college. What do I want people to know what it's like to be me? It's a lot like a fish being told to climb a tree. I'm not going to be good at everything you're good at, and that's fine. I don't need to be. I have my own strengths, and that doesn't make me any less worthy of respect, love, or a good life. I have some developmental problems like ADHD. After years of not doing well in school and wanting to drop out, getting hives from stress and actually developing heart palpitations from all the stress I was under, I've come to realize that I hate the education system's way of gauging intelligence. I suck at math. Hard. Other people excel at it, but other people won't be as good at me as identifying animal species and knowing facts about them. Other people won't be as good as me at drawing, which takes a plethora of knowledge like anatomy and perspective. My autistic cousin can't understand social cues and never went to school because of it, but can build a vacuum cleaner and runs a business at 17. My older sister, who also has ADHD, is currently doing a PhD at only 24, but she has a hard time doing addition and telling time. I really do hate the fact that everyone's existence for the majority of their life is summed up in numbers determined by people who don't even know them. I know this isn't exactly the question asked, but our education system and the IQ test is just so biased. I still get heated about it. I kind of hate the idea that there can even be an average intelligence. Like, what about the impoverished people who never had the chance for a school education? Or the people who live in tribes isolated from society? Maybe they won't know about tube worms, mathematical equations, or linguistics, but they sure as heck will know a lot more about the environment that they live in than I could ever hope to. Not technically below average, but my neurologist or psychologist, not sure which, said that I had the biggest disparity between cognitive functioning she'd ever seen. I was in the 90th percentile for things like reasoning and in the 10th percentile for speed. My entire life has been that feeling of, after a conversation, you realize what you should have said. What is the worst decision you made as a teenager? I rode in the bed of a truck. We'd gotten out of school and my friend and I were talking about our cars we'd parked at a friend's house a couple of streets from the school. A buddy of ours pulled up and asked if we wanted a ride, and I said no because normally I would never ride in the back of a truck, but my friend climbed in, so I did too. We made it to the end of the street and started to make a turn onto the highway, no more than 30 seconds after getting in, when we were T-boned. The truck did a 180 and I flew out and landed on my head on asphalt. Broke my C5 vertebrae, had to wear a neck brace for 7 months, and had my neck fused a year later, and did tons of physical therapy, all because I rode in the back of a truck for half a minute. Not wearing deodorant because I read somewhere that your body odor can turn girls on. Sitting around thinking about all the fun my friends were having without me rather than actually doing anything myself. I latched onto and obsessed about one girl for far too long, when it was really clear she wasn't into me. I may have passed up other opportunities while having my blinders on too. We were both in the same physical education class, and every Friday we would run the mile and track our times, and the second half of the year I was the fastest runner in our class, which apparently impressed some classmates, unbeknownst to me. All the guys would run at the same time, then all the girls would run at the same time, so half the class was in the bleachers watching the other half run at all times. At the end of the year, this girl wrote in my yearbook, "Did you know that some of the girls sit around in the bleachers and talk about your miles times? Whatever." I didn't get into enough trouble as a teenager. I feel like I missed out on a lot of fun by generally being a timid, perfect kid. I joined the debate team and started to regularly wear a fedora. The narrator has to wonder whether you exhibited the stereotypical behavior of a fedora wearer or whether that was just a sad coincidence. Then again, if you were on the debate team, I could imagine you regularly used the phrase, "Well, actually." Screw it, all of my friends know this about me anyway. I was 15 at the time, I didn't know about adult magazines yet, and the only female chest I saw was on my mum, accidentally. About a week after that unfortunate incident, me and my then-girlfriend were making out on the sofa, my parents weren't home. Jackpot, right? Wrong. As things get steamy, she takes her top off. Unaware of what to do and the horrors of my mum still fresh in my mind's eye, I ask her to put her shirt on. 6 months later, when we break up, young love, she tells everyone. I managed to cover myself by saying that my parents were coming home. Screaming at the screen while using both pistols to play the Area 51 game at a truck stop off Interstate 57, after snorting white snow for the second time. Being a craphead to my parents and not trying harder in school. I made a joke about assassinating George Bush on my MySpace in 10th grade. It was a complete joke. I was and still am a fan of the W. Nevertheless, my father got a call from the FBI and I had to come in and talk to some people about what I put on the internet. It was terrifying, mostly because I was scared they were going to tell my dad about all of the gay adult material I visited on his computer. But looking back, that probably wasn't on their agenda. A fan of George Bush and gay adult material? That seems a little counterintuitive. Mine is simple, I just decided not to use protection. Being lame. I didn't really start to be social and enjoy life until my senior year in high school. From ages 13 to 17, I was just a boring guy who sat inside and played his MMO all day long. No girlfriends, no friends, no going out, no exercise, nothing. I don't know how I didn't do anything about it sooner. Dude, I did the same thing in high school. No parties, I just hung out with good friends, played a crap ton of video games and basketball. Never had or kissed a girl either. The minute I turned 18 and was a freshman in college, it all changed. It's so much easier to find women in college because it's a fresh start to create a new you, not being the same person that everyone you grew up with knew. Breaking up with my girlfriend in senior year because I wanted more time to smoke green herb. Being too shy to establish a large network of friends. Coach not putting me in. We could have won state. I could have went pro. When I was about 17, I got a piercing on my chest from a guy in the back of a van for £10. That was not my smartest moment. Also, Matt, just skip this comment, pretend it never happened. If you tell any of our mutual friends, I might let slip about you searching for adult material on YouTube. I got married. Womp 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 womp. I studied hard, didn't hang out with friends, and now stuck in a boring desk job. Wasted my youth. I hung out with friends and got horrible grades. Now I work sanitation at a cheeseball factory 57.5 hours a week for $630. It blows. It's 100 degrees ambient temperature in the area I work in, and I use 180-degree water to spray machines, and everyone constantly slips on the greasy floor while we rush to finish our job in time. I have barely enough money at the end of my budget to actually save for college. I'm a very smart guy and could be an engineer right now, had I worked in school and acquired the scholarships I needed. Also, it turns out my friends were all losers, so now I have no college, no money, no life, and no friends. A 60-hour-a-week job from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. I think everyone complaining they studied too hard made a pretty good choice. I didn't go see my grandpa in hospital. It didn't even occur to me that he wouldn't be okay, and my friends just seemed so important. I'm so sorry, Grandpa. I didn't ask out the girls I liked. Now that I'm out of school, it's so hard to meet girls. Set a cop car on fire with a bunch of friends. I started smoking when I was 15. I spent 20 years addicted to cigarettes and 6 addicted to nicotine gum. I finally kicked nicotine 4 months ago. What a colossal waste of money and time. Stealing money from my grandparents to fuel my white snow habit. I've learned to handle my problems through therapy and medication, but now, more than 10 years later after I stopped, I still have disgusting large scars from my wrists to my elbows that people also find equally disgusting. I can't date anyone because the scars scare them off. Often, strangers point them out, rudely. Yes, it's my fault and I wish to God I could afford surgery to fade the scars so people could see me as normal. What I did to myself is so freaking lame, especially when you're a real adult. Please don't do it. So, half of the comments are along the lines of didn't work hard enough, only thought about partying, now screwed without a job, and the other half are studied too much and didn't have a social life and now screwed without friends. What do I choose? It almost seems as if finding a balance between the two might be ideal. Or you could just do what the narrator did and neglect both of those aspects of high school and play many hours of video games instead. Don't recommend, to be honest. Getting engaged. Fortunately, I realized my mistake before the knot was tied, but still. The breakup would have been so much less traumatic if I hadn't had to return a ring and a dress. Not enjoying high school because of a relationship. Being too self-conscious to go out and have fun, dating the same guy all throughout high school instead of trying new things, procrastinating so much that I got really average grades, and not getting a job so that I could buy a car. Also, not learning to drive. Mine was telling Reddit that I was a teenager. Not giving a crap about my grades. I mean, I knew the material, I knew how to do it, I just didn't do it. Got caught drinking at a company Christmas party when I was 18. I was a server at Outback, making roughly $700 a week while going to school. Got fired, didn't know what to do, so I joined the military. Now I'm back in Afghanistan again. I'm still a teenager and I'm checking these stories from others to help give me advice for my future. Though to contribute, I haven't done much yet. The worst thing I did was cramming. I got so used to it that until now, I let my homework pile up, and when the deadline was coming, I actually waited for the latest possible time to do the homework and end up sleeping very late. Yep, every time. While I was in high school, I used to smoke the wacky tobacco frequently. Skip ahead a couple of years, I moved in with my dad, who I'd just met months prior, and I'm going to a new school. I decided to buy some green herb and smoke that to relieve some of the stress I was having. It had a very negative effect on me, and I experienced some kind of blackout and panic attack. I woke up in the nurse's office with no clue how I got there and paramedics all around me. Skip ahead to later, I ended up dropping out of school because of the panic disorder I developed. Now I can't go around any kind of smoke. It triggers the blackouts. I frequently have miniature attacks. I convinced myself the Mary J was laced with something, so a few years later I decided to try it again. I was quite wrong. I have a reaction to it, and a bad one. I woke up in the hospital for a second time. I regret that I didn't take a gap year before starting college. Not taking advantage of it. Instead of chasing tail and getting into a good college, I played video games, nerded out with my friends, and kept my V-card. Besides that, I really wish I could have joined the Navy when I'd planned to join. I'd be out right about now, and I'm considering that option again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Believing that no one would like me anyway. Staying inside the whole day. The day I graduated, that one girl came up to me with teary eyes and cried onto my chest while hugging me. I didn't get it. I was cold and turned her down with some words I can't remember. I never met her again. I don't even know her name. I was out celebrating my 18th birthday a couple of years ago. An unmarked narc car pulls up as I was walking home with my significant other. They were being jerks and ended up taking me to the station. The whole time they were telling me how they also locked up my friend and were going to have their way with her when they finished with me. I then told them to let me use the bathroom, but they didn't allow it. So I stood up, still cuffed to the bench, and posed as if I'm going to go on the floor. The cops jumped up and escorted me to the bathroom. Once we got in, they surrounded me and one of them punched me. Fighting ensues, I break someone's kneecap, got taken down by 5 cops, and got tased. Fun night. In short, breaking a cop's kneecap. Got a year of probation. Smoking Mary J that led to me being expelled my freshman year from my private high school. Really screwed stuff up. I screwed up as well. Got expelled 3 months before I graduated. Obviously I did something wrong, but doing that in a small town where ironically almost everyone smokes green herb is a big deal apparently. And 2 weeks later, some wrestling kids got caught with worse than what I did and only got 2 weeks suspension. I'd never been in trouble until then, but stats and money looked better for them. It ended up putting a strain on my 4-year, sometimes long-distance relationship, and 2 months ago she left me 2 months before I was supposed to move in with her. I freaking love that girl so much and I'd do anything for her, but I simply can't. It kills me every day. Dating one of my best friends. It ended terribly, lost someone who was a good friend at one point, put up with hell for longer than I wanted to. On the bright side, I learned more about myself and won't make that mistake again. The narrator would like to say that dating one's best friends can be a good decision. It's just a high-stakes one for most people. But then again, some of us are capable of sleeping with our friends and, if anything, being better friends after it ends. So take this author's lesson with a grain of salt. Attempted for a short moment to act like an emo, then stopped and moved on with my life. That was a better idea. Ah, emo kids, that takes me back. I used to be a security guard at a somewhat fancy mall in an upscale part of town. We had a problem with the teen population congregating there. Mostly it was emo kids. Up and down the mall, they'd be everywhere, stalking around and trying to look depressed. It's not like they were threatening in any way. Many of the store managers blamed them for hurting business, though. Many of the older shoppers, the ones that actually spent money, started migrating to a different mall across town. So the mall I worked for instituted a new policy. No teens could be at the mall, except for the movie theater and nearby food court, unless they had an adult with them. The first few weeks of this policy, I spent most of my time finding emo kids and kicking them out. Within a few months, most of the older shoppers returned. Still, it was one of the lamest jobs I've ever had. Not trying out for the football team. Seems like a brotherhood, and I bet I would have released a lot of teenage angst either knocking people down or getting some brain damage. I did this going into my freshman year of high school. I was a doughy, uncoordinated, dorky kid, but I wanted to reinvent myself as a jock going into high school. It kinda worked, but the jocks never accepted me, even though I'd gotten lean and into shape. I was never any good at football, so the coaches rarely put me in games. So all it ever was a very involved workout program for me. It did make a man out of me in that I learned how to take physical punishment and keep on toiling despite discomfort. In the end, I stuck with it until my junior year when I said screw it and switched to cross-country. That made me way happier. I let my depression get in the way of my education. I never told my parents. I'm sure they would have helped me, which in turn could have helped my grades. Oh well, C's get degrees. Doing substances in high school would have been fun as crap. I was sober for over 18 years. Worst decision I made as a teenager was to start smoking cigarettes. I started the summer between my 8th grade and freshman year when I was 13 years old, and quit when I was 30, kinda. Being obsessed with finding the one in my teenage years. Should have had more fun in those relationships instead of obsessing about settling down. Not wearing a Jimmy. I got lucky, no kids, no diseases, but I still wonder if I might have a kid that I don't know about, and if I don't, it was just because of dumb luck. I did nothing to protect myself from transmitted diseases or knocking someone up, and I would screw anyone who'd hold still. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Kinda seems like you're humble bragging about having a whole bunch of unprotected fun with loads of women. Can I just say as a teenager, this thread is really useful. 50% of you say, screw it, I worked too hard. 50% of you say, screw it, I didn't work hard enough. It really clears everything right up. Thanks. Dropping out of high school. 8 years later, still confined to dead-end jobs. Only just starting to scrape my way out of poverty. I eat at least once a day now. That's nice. I was a straight-A student. I could have been anything I wanted had I set my mind to it. I have no words to express the regret. Drinking. I honestly think it's heavily influenced my long-term memory as an adult. Decided that tickling my pickle underneath a desk in the library was a good idea. It turns out it wasn't. Not doing the deed a whole lot more with other randy teens. It's more about what I didn't do. I didn't make an effort to have friends, lose weight, or date. I just assumed it would all come to me and just happen, but nothing did. I'm very pleased with all the traveling I did though, road trips and stuff. Playing too many video games and not doing well in school. I successfully had no social life and no job opportunities once I left. I should have really listened to my parents. But hey, what the hell would they know, right? I was a teenager. I knew everything. Ignoring the advice and help offered by my mum in regards to eating healthy and exercising. Years of bad posture, zero fitness, and horrible diet takes a long time to correct. Well, I can't in all honesty put that missed opportunity just down to being a teenager. I know many people who live into their 50s without ever doing those things. Granted, they tend not to live much longer after that, but maybe that's to be expected. I put my eggplant in crazy. No teenage regrets, nothing but regrets from 18 through 28 though. Stealing my grandfather's codeine while he lay dying in the hospital because I was an addict. Sorry, Papa. Missing the housing deadline for freshman year. Eating the way I did. I can't blame it on genetics, even though both of my parents were overweight. My brother chose to eat better and exercise regularly. I was just lazy. I mean, he'd still choose to eat the bad food, but when he did, he knew that he had to work it off. He's a very healthy guy to this day. Now I'm almost 30 and just getting to the point where I'm sticking with a healthy diet and plenty of exercise. And recently, I had the opportunity to eat some of that pre-packaged processed food and fast food. It doesn't even taste that good. My health, thankfully, has not failed me. with the exception of a broken vertebra and fibromyalgia, but I no longer want to lead that life. I'm paying the price for my bad choices and laziness. Not talking to chicks more. They were easier back then. Wasting my time being fat and not making out with guys. Well, I'm still fat now, but at least I recognized it at the ripe age of 19 and I'm doing something about it. Not bothering to try and better myself by perusing a career that makes more than minimum wage. Got fired from a job because I continually went in blazed. It still keeps me up at night from time to time. I regret the time spent on not studying while in school. I scraped by really the minimum to get a general degree. Studying comes really easy to me, but if I'm not interested in the material, I have no motivation. I think my average was a 6.2 out of 10. Everything above the minimum was a wasted effort to me. Now I'm learning to paint cars in school, and after the first semester I got a 9.99988 in grades. All of these out of 10. Being interested makes all the difference. Can't wait for summer to be over. It's quite the opposite from what my views on school were. I might go to a university sometime in the future, but for now, I'm loving it. I started college at 17. I picked out a local college because I wanted to stay close to a boyfriend. You all know how that works out. I regret caring too much about what other people thought of me. Being afraid to socialize outside of the classroom. When I was 17, I had my first three-way and got both girls pregnant. RuneScape. Wasted 3 years on RuneScape. Sent the famous UK magician Paul Daniels some pretty bad emails. Not my smartest move sending it from the school network. He was a bona fide C-word though. I regret not having fun. A lot of family issues started happening when I was a teenager and I moved around a lot, so I didn't really have any friends and stopped trying to make new ones. Liking anime. Also, telling people I liked anime. What moment made you realize, oh, that's why I'm single? I was bored one night, so I went out and bought some industrial-strength balloons. Came home and spent like 4 or 5 hours learning to make balloon animals. In the afterglow, surrounded by my little rubber friends, I wondered what the heck I'd just done. A little while back, I saw a beautiful girl, just drop-dead gorgeous, and it suddenly hit me how much effort she'd put into it. The clothes, the makeup, the hair, not to mention the probable workouts and dieting, and I realized that if I wanted a girl like that, I had to put in the same effort. Since then, I've been intermittently single rather than completely single. Just this morning, I realized I've been washing my clothes with Cascade dish detergent for the past few months. Hanging out in the hot springs in Banff, in the deep end, and this very attractive woman sits near me. I strike up a conversation with her, and things are going pretty well. Then my youngest comes over to check in with me, then my third kid, then my second kid, then my oldest kid. I look over, and pretty lady was gone. Well, try being a single mom with a special needs kid. I might as well have flamethrowers instead of chesty bits and a double-headed Johnson. My job title on Facebook said Dragonborn for about 2.5 years. That might have been it. Finally alone with a cute girl I've been crushing on since orientation week of university. We're in the basement of a campus building, cleaning out a storage room for a student group. I'm desperately trying to make interesting conversation, and being the smooth ladies' man that I am, I bust out this line. So, do you think there are any security cameras down here? Catching my reflection in the TV after I'd dropped the spoon on the floor and had just started waggling my finger around in the Nutella jar to get the last bits out. Don't be too hard on yourself there. I think everyone's had that moment where they see a grotesque reflection of themselves eating food. I think for people in relationships, the thought is just usually more along the lines of, how am I in a relationship when they see these? On Valentine's Day, I photoshopped a picture of a date, the fruit, to look like it was on fire and posted it to Facebook, saying, "Got a hot date tonight." Huh! I sat down at my record player with all of my 45s and posted a picture on Facebook saying I was hanging with a bunch of singles. I feel like we should be friends. If we could somehow combine both of our puns into hot singles in your area, we'd be kings. Or idiots. I was on a date and had an itch on my chin, so I scratched it while talking to her, and it turned out to be one of those zits that just bleeds and bleeds. I usually have to show my newly acquired skills to someone. I can proudly put the following thing on my resume. Pretty good with a yo-yo. Can solve a Rubik's Cube. Can make balloon animals. Pen spinning. Can make the whole Q-tip disappear in my nose. Can almost swallow a whole hot dog without puking all over self. Oh my. I was at a bar once, after work, chatting up a gorgeous blonde. Things were going so absolutely swimmingly. I mean, joking, having fun, her literally grabbing my hand and putting it on her chest. It was late and we were drunk, and it was that kind of dive bar sort of place. And what happens next? Nosebleed. Freaking nosebleed out of nowhere. I'm not prone to them, I don't get them, but I did then. The last time I was at a bar with my buddy, I walked us over to two girls and just opened with, "What's the worst thing that's ever happened to you?" My buddy's head just dropped with a long sigh. A drunk woman came into a supermarket where I was working and tried to convince me to go out with her daughter, who was quite attractive. It then somehow came to her showing baby pictures she had of one of her other children, I think, and then I said, "That one's a bit young for me." Bam. The mother freaked out at my shockingly tasteless joke, and any chance I had with her daughter was gone. Just why I thought that joke would be a good one to make at that moment, I have no idea. Hey, you weren't the one drunkenly pimping out your kid at a supermarket. A nice girl, just after I graduated university, explained to me why I was single. In university, and shortly after, I would grow a little white boy afro and had these huge mutton chop sideburns. In university, it actually worked out for me when I grew it out. I'm at a small house party and see a girl I find attractive. I walk over to her and try striking up a conversation. She said, "You're not 20 anymore, grow up. You're not getting any girls like that." I cut the hair to corporate world appropriate levels, lost the mutton chops, and it turned out she was right. Way more success after I did that. If you're out there, mystery party lady, thanks for that. I think the last time I approached a girl at the bar, I opened with, "What's your favorite dinosaur?" I was at a bar with a few girlfriends when a group of guys approached us to chat. They introduced themselves and shook our hands. One introduced himself to me and said, "Nice to meet you, I'm Mario." I couldn't help but respond with, "It's me, Mario," in a horrible Italian accent. In my defense, I was buzzed and he was wearing a bright pink polo with the collar popped, a huge white watch, and hair that was most definitely inspired by a cast member from the Jersey Shore. I figured maybe he'll have a sense of humor. He was not amused. A few weeks ago, I asked myself why I was single. I was on my lunch break from work, and there I was, sitting in my parked car, by myself, listening to weird 70s jazz. Oh. I made a Skyrim reference in conversation with a girl I was interested in. It took me a while to shrug it off. "If she's not into Skyrim, you need to look elsewhere." Happened to me too, except the guy then yelled into the bar very loudly, "Oh my god, you're a nerd!" He laughed and then started flirting with my friend. I no longer existed, so my sneak increased. I used to be a guy who tried to bring up his nerdy interests as pickup lines as well. Then I took an arrow to the knee. But in your defense, it's a high-risk, high-reward play. You might meet someone with the same interests as you. Married now, but this was my youth. I've got no game. None. And here's a couple of attempts I made at asking a girl out. Story 1, I was in my early 20s and had a buddy of mine staying with me. We went out for breakfast and this gorgeous woman was our waitress. She was maybe 19, perfect figure, hair down to the small of her back, absolute stunner, and in a low-maintenance kind of way. I wanted to ask her out, but I couldn't find the courage to do it. At one point, I literally got up, walked halfway over to her, then turned around and sat back down. My buddy is talking me up the whole time. "You can do this. She's waiting for you to ask. Look at her. She's just waiting for you. I've seen the girls you date. You can get her." Girls you date was one attractive ex-girlfriend, by the way. I chickened out. We went to the gym, where the whole time he's trying to embolden me. How could she resist these muscles? What muscles? She's still at work waiting for you. Surely she's disappointed you walked out without so much as a compliment. Back to my house, she's still waiting. This goes on for 4 hours. Finally, I decide to go back and ask for her number. I pull into the parking lot and my buddy waited in the car. I went inside and saw her being berated by her manager. She looked tired. Still attractive, but different now. I waited for her scolding to finish, then approached her. "Hi," I said. "My buddy and I were in here for breakfast and you were our waitress. I just wanted to tell you that I think you're gorgeous and I'd love to take you out for dinner this weekend." She blushed. "Ah, how sweet. Are you sure it was me?" "Of course," I told her. "No, really, are you sure it was me because I just started my shift like 5 minutes ago." Story number 2. Back when online chat rooms were a bit more popular, I had an online friend that I'd chat with occasionally when she was in the room. She told me she had a daughter who just started as a bartender in the same city I lived in. I thought it'd be cool to meet her and asked where she worked. Turns out it was in a bar right down the street. She described her daughter as about my age and looks like Gwen Stefani. I went to the restaurant a month or so later, no Gwen behind the bar, but lo and behold, my waitress was about my age and looked like Gwen Stefani. I had a couple of drinks and ordered some dinner. I chatted with my waitress for a bit and oh my god, I think she's flirting with me. She'd smile at me from across the room, check on my table every 5 minutes or so and stay to talk for a bit. A couple more drinks in and I was getting a bit buzzed. Next time she came by, I asked how long she'd worked at the restaurant. She'd been there over a year. I replied, "Oh, I was talking to someone who mentioned their daughter worked here, and she described you. She said her daughter looks like Gwen Stefani, but was new here." This girl was flattered, I was doing great, but I was definitely buzzed and ready to mess the whole thing up. I thought to myself, I need to stop talking to her before I say something stupid. Then I did exactly that. I didn't just think about not talking to her, I said it. I literally said, "I've had a few drinks and need to stop talking to you before I say something stupid." She walked away and didn't say another word to me. My 29-year-old friend was getting a lot of pressure from his girlfriend to get his life together, so he decided that the fastest way to do that was join the army. I said to myself, and that's why I'm single. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Went to a party with an extremely hot girl who was completely into me. I stepped out to smoke and somehow started talking to the 65-year-old neighbor over the fence. Ended up getting drunk with him on the back porch talking about life and crap until about 3 a.m., and she had already left when I went back inside. Priorities confuse me sometimes. To finish the story though, after I noticed she had left, I convinced Bruce, the neighbor, to come inside and hang out as the party was still going. Ended up getting him to play beer pong and man, he was a frickin' ringer. We ended up running the table for like 7 or 8 games. The best part was when we finally lost, we stepped out with a bunch of friends to smoke and he was the one person everyone wanted to talk to. He was seriously now the most important man at the party. Right before he left, he kind of pulled me aside, gave me a great big hug and told me thank you for the best night he'd had in 20 years. "I'll never forget you, Bruce. You're the frickin' man." I just stare at them and don't have the stones to start a conversation with them, minus the simple hello. I mean, you're one up on where the narrator used to be. Not that I think staring is a good thing, but I think the moment I realize someone is hot, I stare fixatedly anywhere but at them because I'm worried about being caught taking a perv. I don't really leave my room much. Excluding classes, I don't ever really feel the need to go out. I just play Steam games and hermit myself away. Who knows, maybe one day a boyfriend will fall out of the ceiling. One night I met up with an old college friend in Manhattan for some drinks. We met up with a couple of her friends later that night and headed to her studio apartment at around 2 a.m. We get to her place and I ask to use the restroom. Then one of her friends says, "God, my boyfriend is so cute." Not as cute as my name. "Shush, he can hear you." Yes, I can hear you. I come out of the bathroom and immediately try not to make eye contact. I play with her chihuahua for 10 minutes while the Yankee game encore is playing on the TV. Her friend falls asleep on the couch and then she, my interest, looks at me. "Come over here and sleep for a bit." No, I can't. My car's parked at the street where I have to move it at 6 a.m. and that's in like a couple of hours. "Don't worry, I'll wake you up." No, I'll just stay awake. "You sure?" Yep. An hour passes by, I wake up her friend who's sleeping on the couch and give her a ride home. I get home at around 7 a.m. and think through my life choices over a J and a cold one. In short, I didn't want to get a parking violation. That's why I'm single. So you see, what I did was write a whole new scheduler which now runs multiple threads in parallel. What I do first is calculate the number of records read from the database in the last hour, divide by total records, and they always increase BT_dub to create a number of threads. Then it loops through that many times and does that thread thing. I can positively say that I increased processing time by X times. That was my response to, "What do you do in your firm?" asked by a pretty girl in the bus whom I had a chance to chat with. I'm not a very smart person. I've sworn off dating till I'm employed and making a living wage again. In my current state, I wouldn't be a boyfriend. I'd be a burden. Not going back to the dating pool until I'm the kind of guy I wouldn't mind seeing my own hypothetical daughter date. Gather round, it's story time. This actually happened some time ago, still living at home with my parents. I was about 16 at the time. So my mum comes home one day and tells me she found a little purse someone apparently forgot at a department store. I still remember what it had in it. I took it, opened it. It had like $20 in it, some lip gloss, some school ID, and a piece of gum. Now, it wasn't much, but it was someone else's belongings and I wasn't about to keep them. Now, none of the things in her purse had any personal info other than her name. No phone number, no address, no nothing. So only thing I could come up with was to look up the school's name, call and ask if she was a student there. And so I did. I called, explained the situation to whoever was on the other end of the line, but lady on the phone told me she couldn't give me any info on her because it was against policy. That actually made sense, right? I mean, it would be kind of messed up for them to give me any information I wanted on her just because I knew her name and where she goes to school. So I told them I'd give them my contact information and asked them to locate that girl, tell them about the purse and give her my info in case she wanted it back. A couple of days went by before I got the call. She sounded appreciative and all. Turns out she lived pretty far away, but she had some sort of class near my house on Saturdays, and we agreed to meet at a McDonald's halfway between her class and my house. Saturday comes, I go to McD's and wait. I didn't wait long for her to show up, and when she did, she seemed really happy and thankful. She told me I could keep the money if I wanted to. All she really needed was the school ID card. I said no, of course. I told her that it was her money and that it didn't seem right for me to keep it for any reason. She thanked me again and said, she said, "Well, if you won't take my money, let me at least buy us some ice cream." I said no again. Again, I told her it would feel wrong to have her spend money on something I did just out of being a nice guy. I remember her sounding disappointed when she said, okay. So I said something to the effect of, "All right then, see ya." I turned around and walked home. Not long after starting to walk away, I replayed the scene in my mind and thought to myself, "You stupid, stupid motherfricker. I can't read clues to save my life," I realized that day. You poor, poor man. Still though, your stupid, stupid mother effer came from someone else making all the effort on you. Most of us say stupid, stupid motherfricker at ourselves after something we've done and got turned down for. So count yourself lucky. I'm too scared of rejection to make a move, and that's why I'm single. Besides low self-esteem and the slew of normal issues, it's things like the fact that I have Riverdance music on my MP3 player. I left my college library at night, and halfway down the hill, the girl who was walking in front of me turns around and starts just talking to me. She says she saw me in the library and asked to walk with her. Thinking nothing of what was happening, I walked with her and just talked about random crap. I got to my block and just said, "Nice to meet you," and bye. When I got to my door, I realized, God fricking damn it. I completely blank when girls look at me with that look and start flirting with me. I even had a couple of beers beforehand. Damn it, I'm so awkward. About 5 minutes after I've been talking to a girl, my reaction usually goes something like this. "That was nice," followed several seconds later by me reliving every potentially awkward thing I might have said and done. I'm a 22-year-old guy. I was at a bar one night and this gay guy came up and asked if he could buy me a drink. I politely declined and explained that I was batting for the other team, but it sparked this entire discussion that I was actually interested in having. I'm generally interested in exploring other people's perspectives on things. While we were standing there talking, a small blonde girl walked up to me and said, "Hey, I like your face," and I nodded at her and said, "Thanks, you too," and went right back to my conversation. The guy I was talking to stared at me completely flabbergasted and said something to the effect of, "Are you sure you're not gay? 'Cause you just crushed that poor girl." So basically, I'm completely oblivious to the world around me. Because I won't settle just to have a significant other. I'd rather be alone than with someone I'm not truly happy with. I'm in an engineering school.
We can use this as an excuse? Great, now I can stop not trying so hard.
I was PvPing with some people from my guild when a fairly hot guy texted me and asked if I wanted to see a movie or hang out. I didn't bother responding because we were neck and neck in the match and I didn't want the distraction. Okay, my sad answer is working on not being in love with my best friend. That one's actually going pretty well. But my fun one? A couple of years ago, I was out to dinner with some friends. There was a nice little group of us and they'd collectively decided to play the part of my wingman. Yep, I didn't just have one wingman, I had a frickin' squadron. Well, our server that night was a really cute waitress. Funny, quick, really doing a good job. My squadron had zeroed in. They were talking me up all night, complimenting her. It was to the point where all I had to do was say, "Hey, let's go out sometime." That's what I should have said. Sadly, that is not what I said. I didn't actually say anything so much as yelled, "Pretty women scare me!" At which point I put my head on the table and kicked myself. She was super embarrassed as well, both of us red-faced. The rest of the group took a second to process what happened, and then they just started laughing their butts off. If they weren't sitting in chairs, they'd have been rolling on the floor. It was one of the more memorable times when I had a, "Yep, that's why I'm single" moment. Apparently, telling a woman she looks tired is universally an insult. Whatever, I don't care, and you do look tired. Mine was when I laughed at my ex-girlfriend's tearful story of her mum's cancer scare. To be fair, she believed God had turned her mum's ovarian cancer into a baby. I tooted my dog awake last night as I was watching Olympics and Twitch plays Pokemon. It was a glorious 20-second butt trumpet followed by a full minute of deep belly laughing. Although I would routinely do the same around my ex and Dutch oven the bed. Well, I'm single because I'm terrible at picking up signs. I'm a good-looking and pretty muscular guy. I'm just awful at picking up hints. I'm not even awkward, too. There have been countless times I've messed up. One time I was in line at lunch. Cute girl walks up and starts to talk to me, asking what I'm doing. I tell her eating. I say nothing else and she walks away, saying, "He's getting food." I stand there like a statue. Cringe. When did you see an idiot who had no idea what the law was? I had a sovereign citizen walk into my office a few years ago and try to get me to argue his case in state court after the state seized land he owned for failure to pay taxes. I had a vague idea of what sovereign citizens believed before he came in, so at least I wasn't totally caught off guard. I didn't even try to explain the law, though. I just told him I couldn't help him, then gave him the phone number of a lawyer I hate in town, and sent the guy on his way. Mum's significant other is a cop. Had to go to the courthouse to arrest a guy for stealing something from the courthouse. He was in court for stealing. Lawyer was all flustered and like, what the frick? The thief asked why he couldn't have a warning like all the other times he got caught stealing. No, you're going to prison this time. This one guy bought all of a company's shares, which means he bought both the company's assets and its debts, and then he filed a name change with the Secretary of State. He thought changing the corporation's name would legally absolve him of all liability for the company's debts. Why do we have to pay Company X's payroll? This is now Company Y, etc. My God. So many people believe that lawyers will get you out of the huge mess that is purely your own creation. When I tell them that they have little chance in trial because there was a camera that caught every little bit of their stupidity, as an example, I often get them saying, "Well, what do I have a lawyer for?" or, "Well, you're not doing a very good job." It's like they think, surely a good lawyer can delete evidence. I think the general misconception is that the legal system runs on a schedule like you see on TV. A lot of clients think that if they come in on Monday, their lawsuit will be filed on Tuesday, then depositions will be done by Wednesday, and by Friday they'll have prevailed in trial. During grand jury duty, I fell asleep and snored very loudly on more than one occasion. Usually during state police testimony, at least the accused and civilian witnesses had some emotion to keep it interesting. Anyway, that's how I got the 50-cent coffee turned into free coffee. I was telling a pro bono client what she needed to do to get her kids back, and one of the things was a clean substance test. I specifically said, "So, no green herb, no white snow, no smack, nothing illegal, okay?" She agreed surprisingly quickly, so I moved on. 5 minutes later, she interrupted me to say,
Wait a minute, is ice illegal?
Ice is slang for crystal. I think some of the impact was taken out of this story by the fact that the narrator had to change literally every word for an illegal substance. But nonetheless, this woman's incredulousness that she probably shouldn't take the rock that made Walter White's fortune is pretty darn funny. Lawyer here. I do criminal law but had to run a civil trial in my articles. Client was a tenant being sued by a landlord for a metric frick ton of cleaning costs. They insisted they'd left the place spotless. During the trial, it became clear the move-out inspection was done and the cleaning cost estimate a week before the clients actually moved out, and thus before the place was cleaned. A ton of it was estimates of costs to throw out all the stuff left in the suite. You know, the property they hadn't moved out prior to moving out. They were arguing that it didn't matter when the inspection was done. The judge strongly and emphatically disagreed. I did intake and investigation for a law firm for about 4.5 years. Duties included interviewing the client, figuring out if it's a case the lawyer will want, sending along or getting paperwork started if it is, among other things. So, I get a call from this guy. He was calling about a dog bite case. Easy stuff, we always take those cases. So I start interviewing him to get details. It's pretty standard at first, injuries from the bite, medical treatment received, date of injury, and then I get to asking, do you know the at-fault party and was a police report filed? I should know her, she's my wife. Oh, are you currently divorced? Nope. Okay, any chance the dog actually belongs to someone else? Nuh-uh. I see, and you both live together and have the same insurance policy? Yep. Right, well, is your insurance denying the claim? Nope, I just want to sue the B-word. Lovely, sir. Are you guys legally wed with a marriage license and everything? That's right. So I tell him we can't really help him there because, well, in essence, he'd be suing himself. We'd be pursuing her insurance and assets, which are, technically, also his insurance and assets. The insurance company was paying the claim just fine, so he couldn't file for an insurance dispute. I even let him know that, to be perfectly technical, he was bit by his own dog. Nah, man, her family is rich. We can sue her family, man. Does her family own the dog and did it happen on their property? Nope, but it's their fault for raising the witch. Getting him off the phone was a pleasure. Oh man, sovereign citizens are my favorite lunatics. They're always cocked and ready to explain stuff to you about the law, like how taxation is participatory, state-sponsored violence. I knew a guy in college who called himself a sovereign citizen. He kept saying things like, yeah, well, if I don't pay taxes, then what? What are they going to do? I tried to explain they'd arrest him, but he seemed to think that when the cops came, he would announce that he just doesn't give them permission to touch him, and as a sovereign citizen, isn't beholden to their laws. He seemed to think the cops would say, well, crap, he got us. Well, all charges dropped, instead of just overpowering him, cuffing him, and charging him. I pleaded with him not to try this stuff out for real. These idiots make more sense when you realize that they just see laws as kind of a spell. If you say the right words, I am not John Smith, I am John, a person, or know the right spell components, this flag has a gold fringe, so I cannot be tried in this courtroom, then they can somehow get what they want. Rather than ill-conceived, it's more like ignorant. Oh, I couldn't do that? But I didn't know. Nobody ever told me that. I'm innocent. I always ask them, if I didn't know I shouldn't kill you, and I killed you, does that mean I'm innocent? But the cop lied to me, so I ain't even worried. This is all gonna get dropped, no problem. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to represent me pro bono. This is gonna be big for you. Oh, you sweet summer child. I know people try this all the time with freelance authors and artists, but lawyers? Really? As a lawyer, I can confidently say people try this all the time. Do they also say, but it would look great on your resume? Yeah, my resume that of course details all the names of my clients. I did all the testing and schooling necessary if I wanted to work in this awful field of law. I worked in a family law office for a few years. I live in a state in which spousal support, alimony, may be terminated in the event the recipient begins to live with a new romantic partner. One client hated his ex-wife's mother almost as much as his ex. His ex's mum lived with her. He complained often of their codependent relationship. He called our office one day in an unusually good mood. He had had an idea and he needed to come talk to us. They're in a romantic relationship, he practically shouted at me as I let him in the office. Huh?
My wife and her mom. I don't have to pay any more alimony if she's in a romantic relationship.
Are you telling me that you think your ex and her mother have a romantic relationship? After repeating that, at best, would be wasting his time and money to advance such a stupid argument in the court, he insisted we research its viability anyway. It was really more sad than anything. I mean, that's presumably a case where once you take the payment from him, you really go in hoping that you don't have a case, because who wants to find out all the details and provide the evidence for that? Aside from sovereign citizens, the most common are,
I didn't violate the no-contact order, he or she called me.
But the thing is, these people never hang up immediately, so they do violate it. Or, I didn't assault him or her, I just shoved him or her to the ground.
I stole the money, but I gave it back after they called the police.
My landlord had his friend serve me, not himself, so I can just ignore the eviction since I wasn't properly served. That's the opposite of correct. Having someone else to do it is required for it to be a proper service. Now, you and your kids need to find a place to rent with an eviction on your record. I'm not a lawyer yet, but while doing a term at a law office, I once had a prospective client say these exact words. I know how the law works. I watch Law and Order. Also, we're in Canada, so, no. During my divorce, my ex asked if I could get ordered to give pet support. She wanted to take our dog and make me pay for it. Vet visits, food, toys, the lot. In case you're wondering, no. If it's not a human, it's property. And if it's property, you accept all responsibility. After all, you don't just go play at the park one day and have no choice but to come home with a dog. If you have a restraining order against someone, then call them. They should either not answer if they know it's you or hang up. It's unlikely that someone would get violated for being called by the person they're restrained from, but they could be. Just like if you're out somewhere and the person who has a restraining order shows up, you should leave to avoid violating the order. You also can't contact that person through a third party. I have a restraining order against my ex, and he asked his father to send me some photographs and a note once. He got violated for it. I work in legislation. One group of individuals have gotten together and decided via a vote that the law which covers all of Scotland doesn't apply to them and they can act as they want to. Ah, I see. Well, I vote that I never have to pay taxes again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Pennsylvania has mandatory jail time for DUIs. Most people who aren't eligible for a diversionary program will plead out the mandatory minimum, do their weekend time, and be done with it. I had a client's mother call me demanding to speak to the judge at sentencing the next day because her son had a kid. No, lady, lots of criminal defendants have kids. You can't skirt mandatory minimum sentences just because someone has part-time custody of his or her kid. The next day, sure enough, she shows up to court with her son, drunk, and his kid. The son was clearly intoxicated, the kid starts crying, and the mother keeps trying to explain to the judge how he couldn't go to jail because it was his custody day. The judge was not amused and threw him in jail that day. I had one client that devised a scheme to commit loan fraud and then discharge said loan through bankruptcy. I had to shoot that down real quick. I intern at a courthouse. One of my jobs is to walk lay people through filing cases pro se, usually because they're too poor to get a real lawyer. So, helping people with no concept of the law is part of my description, but outside of the true crazies, I think the biggest thing is, I don't want to sue them. I think they think that suing someone is like a terrible, horrible thing, and if they win, it will ruin their opponent forever. And they all want to do something that would require a court order without bringing a case.
But can't we just work this out between ourselves?
I mean, sure, but then nothing requires either of you to uphold the agreement.
But do I really have to go through the court for this?
Ignoring the fact that, yes, you do, why are you asking me, a courthouse worker, this? You're already here. Not in court, but saw something on Facebook that made me laugh. Someone I went to school with went to a children's clothes shop in the city centre to buy clothes for her son. She took the tags off the clothes and threw away the receipt. When she got home, she realized that the clothes were too small for her son. She brought them back, demanding a refund. The manager refused, citing store policy that you have to have the tags and the receipt in order to get a refund. She then took a picture of the manager, 2 cashiers, and the security guard of the shop and put them on Facebook along with their names. She wrote a very long, ranty Facebook post claiming that she was entitled to a refund under the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act. The Act lists the various criteria needed in order to get a refund, replacement, or repair of the item that you bought. One of them states that the item must be fit for purpose. It basically means that the item you buy should be able to perform the action it's meant to. So if you buy a hairdryer that doesn't dry your hair, you'd be entitled to a refund, replacement, or repair. You learn this in your very first year of secondary school. She was claiming that because the pair of jeans she bought for her son didn't fit him, they weren't fit for purpose. Despite a metric frick-ton of comments telling her that that's not how the law works, she couldn't see her misinterpretation and just kept repeating, "But they don't fit my son." It was hilarious and sad at the same time. The one thing I will say about this awful woman is that there are stores who will refund you for things that you misjudge the size on, but they do have the option to say no at their discretion. And although there are exceptions, you generally have to keep the receipt. When an idiot like the narrator forgets the receipt, he goes in and is so polite, and that generally works for getting a replacement or, something else from the store at least. Going full Karen is not the way you want to try it. I think the most common example of these people I saw was that people thought that if they got away with breaking the law, at some point the money they were stealing belonged to them. Some kind of squatters' rights corollary? Clever people don't like to think of themselves as criminals. Eventually, they rationalize theft. They underpay me, they owe me this money, it's only fair. But when you return to the sweet arms of virtue and justified, you get careless. Case in point, here's a story I found. I was a prosecutor. Virtually everything that comes into criminal court was a matter of stupidity. It's not like on TV. Criminal masterminds are never caught. If you've got some clever plan to defraud your company, chances are you'll get away with it. For a while. We won't catch you until you get stupid. You get caught when you start believing your own bullcrap. I remember one lady who was helping herself to a bunch of county government money. She'd worked out a good plan and executed it flawlessly. No one casually examining the books would ever detect her theft. So the years, yes, years, went by and she got lazy. I mean, she put so much effort into concealing her theft, and nobody even so much as looked at her books. It was a lot of double-entry drudgery to conceal her peculation. She stopped working so hard at it after a while. Basically, she decided that the money she was taking was her money. They owed her, it was only fair. So she kept on taking money, she didn't just hide it under paperwork anymore. And nothing happened. No one even looked. She was more confident that even if someone did a forensic audit, they'd see the justice of the thing. The county owed her. It was her money. Finally, someone looked. They did see the justice of the thing. She was arrested. That's when I met her. She was furious. To her, it was all so unfair. Here she'd worked so hard to conceal her little peculation habit, and nobody even looked. It's like they didn't look on purpose, to trick her into letting her guard down. What about that, huh? Isn't that some kind of entrapment to trick people into letting their guard down? Why was I picking on her? It's all the fault of those lazy a-holes who didn't check her books when she was taking the time to cover up her theft by pretending it was just bad accounting. If they'd done their jobs and caught her earlier on, there would have been so much less money missing, and she wouldn't have gotten as much trouble. But they didn't even try, and now it's a ton of money. How was that her fault? Life is unfair, I guess. She didn't get a life sentence. I think it was 5 years plus restitution. While I was working in the DA's office, I offered a defendant a plea deal on a low-level traffic offense. The deal would let him keep his license if he agreed to pay off his fines within 3 months. After he agreed and signed it, he asked, "So, do I get a bill later for your services?" I had to tear up the plea deal and explain to him again that I work for the state and I don't represent his interests. Then I had to get him to sign another one. A client of my father once assumed that the judge would go easier on him because he'd already confessed to his priest, and in the end, that's the judgment that matters most. This was for kidnapping and the unspeakable act, by the way. A guy was surprised to learn that he had to pay off his mortgage balance before he could get his title deeds back, and he'd never heard of this before. He said we were supposed to be helping him, and threatened to tell the professional legal body here. I encouraged him. Many lay clients protested us asking questions about their story. Apparently, since we were their lawyers, we had to believe everything they said and not question it. A guy tried to enforce a contract and said that there was a signed document, so it must be 100% enforceable. And then there was this guy representing himself in person. He thought that, among other things, the judge was biased against him because the judge didn't accept his views. All judges that have dealt with him are corrupt because they didn't rule in his favor. He demanded the correct transcript, which accords to his recollection of events, and he called the judge Queen B-word and faxed hardcore adult material to the courts. The statute says I have to knowingly possess these substances, and that means I had to know they were illegal. Also, the sovereign citizens I've been dealing with more and more frequently always want me to argue the typical "I never created joinder with the Corporation of the United States" stuff. I had a friend who gave 30 days notice to their landlord somewhere towards the beginning of the month, though not on the 1st. Their landlord then began making plans for upgrades and repairs beginning on the 1st of the following month. But no, my friend said. The 30-day notice went from the 10th of this month until the 10th of the next month. They'd even gone so far as to spell this out in the written notice provided to the landlord, including a quote of the prorated amount of rent they would pay for the extra 10 days they would occupy the apartment past the 1st. The landlord couldn't wrap their mind around this idea. He had workers there bright and early on the 1st, ready to begin remodeling the kitchen. My friend refused them entry. They called the landlord and he insisted that since rent was due on the 1st, the 30 days notice began on the 1st, not the 10th. In spite of the written notice provided by the tenant and several follow-up conversations, not to mention that prorated rent check. My friend did talk to a lawyer. It took some doing to get the lawyer to understand, given how odd the situation was. The lawyer even said it might be hard to find precedents, simply due to the sheer stupidity of the landlord. This was such a straightforward issue. He advised to essentially ignore the idiot if possible and call the cops if necessary. Fortunately, it didn't come to that. The landlord left them alone for the most part. The 10th arrived and they moved as promised. So I'm not a lawyer, but someone who was never the sharpest tool in the shed from school found out you couldn't be tried for the same crime twice. So he was tried for theft when he was younger. However, as the witness didn't show up to give a statement, the case on him fell through or something. So after finding this golden info about not being tried twice, he thought he could never be tried again for theft. Went and nicked a video game from a huge chain supermarket which has signs saying, "We will prosecute all incidents of theft," and his prime defense was, "But you can't be tried for the same crime twice, and I was tried for theft when I was 16. In short, you can be tried for the same crime twice. At boot camp, we had one bright-eyed young soul go stomping off to the leadership after we got out our first pay stub, because we didn't get paid overtime. The lieutenant was even nice to him at first and pointed out that we were salaried and exempt, so overtime wasn't a thing. The dude tried to argue a few different things about minimum wage and Illinois' state laws and finished with a threat that he was going to contact the state labor board. The lieutenant laughed in his face and told him good luck, then called his immediate supervision and had them revoke his phone privileges. Not because the threat would have worked, but just to prove a point. My stepson fully believed that if he had another child, that his child support would be lowered on the first two. I tried to tell him that it didn't work that way, but he didn't believe me. He is not a smart man. What's the best example of survivor bias? People who survive some sort of disaster like an earthquake, an attack, or whatever, and then saying that they had the will to survive and that's why they were able to make it out. I'm pretty sure like 99% of the victims that didn't make it also had the will to survive, but the universe is random and shoved a metal beam through their chest. After steel helmets were introduced in World War I, the amount of head injuries increased sharply. When higher-ups were considering scrapping the helmets as a result, it was soon pointed out that these injuries would have been fatal if the men were still wearing cloth caps. From Gen X here, grew up in the country. My Facebook is filled with, "We didn't need no seatbelts as a kid," and "We used to ride in the back of the truck and we're fine. Frick those pansies." Yes, I rode in a car without seatbelts. Heck, most of the cars we rode in didn't have them. And yes, we rode in the back bed of the trucks, looking up over the cabs, going at 60. And yes, I remember riding with adults that chugged Coors Light as they drove a truckload of hay and just didn't think it was odd. You know what? A lot of the kids who did that crap died. That's why you're not going to get anyone arguing on Facebook. They're dead. I think the best example of the bias is just asking old people how they lived so long. You don't learn anything.
Well, my kids slept on their stomachs and rode around in the front seat of the car with no seatbelts, all before their first birthdays, and they were fine.
When I was a kid, my grandparents went to take me out somewhere and my mum went to hook my car seat up in their car. Her father lost it, ranting and raving for a few minutes, and then my mum finally said if you don't put him in the car seat, you don't get to take him out. End of discussion. He relented, we drove about a mile up the road and then he pulled over and took me out of the car seat. I told my mum afterwards, not to tattle, but because I thought it was cool to ride in the big boy seat and I never drove anywhere with him again. Yeah, I think the thing that annoys me so much about this one is that Gramps actually had to go to extra effort to have his little act of defiance and endangered his kid and achieved nothing. What a stubborn moron. Whenever you hear people talking about how refusing to give your possessions when robbed at gunpoint is the best option, the people who this didn't work out for aren't here to tell the tale. If someone tries to kidnap you at gunpoint, however, you're apparently much more likely to survive if you run evasively instead of complying. If they end up shooting at all, then the chances of them hitting and the chances of that shot being fatal are apparently much smaller than the chances of them killing you after the kidnapping. This does, however, assume that there's people in range to hear the gunshots. If they can just fire at you without repercussions, then they only really have to wound you enough to capture you afterwards. Well, my grandma is a smoker and she lived to be 80. My mum is an active smoker. She turned 77 this year. My dad was an active smoker and he would have been 81 this year, but he died at 52 from lung problems. I don't smoke. Terminal illness, namely the big C. Essentially, if nothing else gets you, the big C will. So for every disease you successfully treat or prevent, the greater the likelihood the person will die of the big C. As we learn to cure more diseases, the rate of death by C word will go up.
Smoking reduces incidence of Alzheimer's disease for the same reason.
Abraham Wald and the missing bullet holes. In World War II, mathematicians were tasked with how best to armor planes. Since extra plating added weight, they wanted to use as little as possible by analyzing the bullet holes on planes that returned, and only to armor the places that got shot the most. Wald noticed that almost none of the planes they looked at had bullet-type holes in the engine area, and realized that planes that get shot in the engine even once will be destroyed. Since they were only analyzing the planes that came back, nobody else had even considered the planes that didn't make it back. So they just put extra armor around the engines and the planes were much more resilient. Autism. Nobody ever had autism before vaccines. No, people with autism were just labeled as retarded and locked in the shed. I once got a jar of cherry-flavored jelly beans from a friend as a congratulation gift. She was super thrilled about it and explained that she'd seen that I always have a little jar of cherry-flavored jelly beans on my desk, so obviously they were my favorite, and wasn't she clever for figuring it out? I didn't have the heart to explain to her that the reason the jar had a buttload of cherry jelly beans in it isn't because I like them, but because I hate them and they're the only flavor out of the multi-packs that I buy that I won't eat. Similar. I worked in a deli and there were always sesame seed bagels left towards the end of the day. So many. So when I wanted to make a sandwich for the day, I would always use sesame, because I didn't want to take away from the more popular flavors so the customers could have them. My friend noticed and would always bring me the sesame bagels, saying how she knew they were my favorite. I never told her because it was so sweet she was thinking of me. Everyone share this post if you rode in the bed of a truck and turned out fine. Everyone who didn't turn out fine is too dead to say so. Safety equipment. I'm a car guy and a relatively new parent, 3-year-old and a newborn. The amount of older people who say, I was just fine without 20 airbags, or why the heck is he in a rear-facing seat at 2.5? They forget to add the part where they weren't in any car crashes or at most low-speed ones. Just because you made it through fine doesn't mean that improvements aren't needed. All the relationship advice you get, especially on Reddit relationships and things like that, it's all purely anecdotal. Oh, don't worry, honey. I married my significant other after just having dated 3 months, and we're still going strong 8 years later. Follow your heart. Like, okay, good for you, but generally speaking, it's not a good idea to marry someone after 3 months, and you never see the countless stories of people that did that and ended up bad. I never believed in love at first sight until it happened to me. Turned out the guy was a total butthole and I got my heart broken. Not entirely sure if this is the same, but the argument that older furniture, especially mid-century modern, was better than today's. I'm an amateur furniture maker and I've been reading up. I like the Mission style. It became popular in the early 1900s because it was handmade and was better quality than the mass-produced garbage that was becoming commonplace. This was over 100 years ago. We keep going through cycles of the same thing. In college, when I was a junior, in engineering, they brought a couple of people to tell us about their internships and how they got them. They talked for 10 minutes each on their experience and why they recommend it, among other things. And yes, we all know it's good to get an internship, the money, the practical experience, resume booster, contacts, among other things. Neither of these people said a word about how they got it though, which was kind of the point of going to the seminar. So many of us in 2008 and 9 were having trouble finding internships, so I was hoping to get some insight, an avenue I hadn't considered before, that kind of thing. Afterwards, I asked them, "So, can you tell me about how you landed these? Was it career fair, applying online, that kind of thing?" The girl said, "Well, my uncle works at that plant, so…" And the guy said, "My dad knows a guy who worked there, and he recommended me." Damn. Well, the narrator knew that nepotism happens in all fields, but he'd just kind of hoped that it might be a little less prevalent in a field so dependent on actual skill and knowledge, like engineering. Gosh darn it. Post-traumatic stress disorder. We think it's so common today and that it also used to be so common, but past people just didn't have any awareness of it. And while lack of awareness in the past was one reason it's so much more prevalent today, another reason is that past traumatic things used to just kill people so much more often than they do today. Medical science has enabled so many people to survive horrible events. Now people have PTSD, whereas once they would have just come down with a bad case of dead. All available science shows that expectations of what counts as normal or endurable do make an impact, but yeah. A lot of the idea that Grandpa didn't get no PTSD despite seeing all of his friends die in front of him while fighting Krauts in heavy combat for 3 years, god darn Vietnam syndrome and modern millennial snowflake military telling everyone they're special and broken and entitled. That's all horse crap. Grandpa probably got really messed up and just did his best to hide it. Same with most people now who have the symptoms. And in most historical eras, things that tend to produce PTSD were so common that it just wouldn't have been remarked on at all. Grandpa also lived at a time when it was socially acceptable to have your first drink of the day at like 9 a.m. after you finished your breakfast cigarette. All the music from a given decade is so much better than music nowadays. Well, yeah, because we don't remember the bad music from back then, because it was bad. We don't play it anymore. Only the good music from the past is still played today. However, bad new music is being experienced right now in the present as it's being released. Time has not yet weeded out the bad music from nowadays because it's still nowadays. You ever see a beautiful building from the 1800s and think, wow, houses back then were so much more beautiful and built better than today? That's because all the ugly and poorly built buildings from back then were torn down and made way for newer buildings. In Mexico, they started a few years ago a campaign to report common crimes, and guess what? Crime statistics went up. Who would have thought? Famous people acting like they succeeded just because they worked harder than everyone else and not because of any factor of luck. All the people who worked really hard and still didn't become rock stars would be able to tell you that there's no guarantee of success, but they can't tell you that because they aren't famous. The whole, giving birth has happened for millions of years, it's a natural process and I don't need any medical interventions at all, argument. For millions of years, women and babies have also been dying when giving birth. Yeah. The amount of women and babies that died during births was no joke. Everyone complains about the number of stepmoms in fairy tales, but it was just so common back then that when the first wife died giving birth, you just married another one to help manage the house and kids. In 1850 in Finland, 1,400 out of every 100,000 births resulted in death. Now, it's only 3 out of 100,000, and that's just coming from data that's being collected in the 1800s. There's no telling how many women died previously. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. You know that early 20s feeling when you don't know what you're doing with your life and have so much riding on your decisions to determine your success 20 years down the road? Yet you look back at your family and friends and wonder how they all had their crap together and were functional, stable families in their 20s? You don't understand how you're struggling so much on the edge of failure, but they were able to do it so easily with very little failure? Yeah, that bias. When people say that ancient civilizations like the Romans or Egyptians were way better at construction than us, a large reason why they think this is survivor bias. You see the ruins of some structures, but not the 99% of all other structures built that didn't last from the time. Not to mention the fact that a lot of those structures, they had unlimited resources to build. Also, we now design things for a certain useful life. A lot of buildings are around 50 years life. This is because it doesn't make sense for a business to invest resources for longer design life. The productivity cult. Not that productivity to a point can't be good, but people being pointed to probably aren't succeeding because they do those super productive things. They'd be successful anyway because of who they are. Wearing a single type of clothing to save time, like Zuckerberg, might help a bit, but he's successful because he had the smarts and money to get into Yale and study CS. Wearing hoodies isn't going to take a guy with a community college education and make him a millionaire. Hoodies are nice though. Why do we need vaccines? Nobody dies of polio or smallpox or measles anymore. Why do we need NATO, the UN, or the EU? Europe doesn't get into large wars anymore. Nostalgia and memories. No one wants to remember all the crappy parts of their childhood or growing up, and we as humans specifically try to forget those moments. Everyone is so nice and helpful, say all attractive people ever. I would say evolution. So many people just can't wrap their heads around the actual evolutionary process. A popular mantra on Reddit is along the lines of, every single ancestor of yours has successfully procreated for the last 3.6 billion years. I mean, yeah, no crap. When I hear people marvel about how well-fitted together ecosystems are, it's sort of a half-truth. What's true is that the species we have now, as of the present moment, are whatever current iteration of species are best suited to filling ecological niches, relatively speaking of course. But that sort of glosses over how much failure has happened along the way. In the billions of years from prokaryotes on, way more gene mutations resulted in species that were not suited for ecological niches, and they died. Or the species that once had a niche were rendered obsolete by changes in surface temperature, precipitation patterns, sea levels, ocean chemistry, new predators, a loss of food source, among other things. What we have currently are the very few species that didn't die off, which is what most species throughout history have ultimately done. Died. Yeah, I recently started to read into what an absolute crapshoot the evolutionary process is. Most things don't make it, and a bunch of them can start to make it, and would have made it a lot longer if not for a sudden fluke in whatever area or time they were living in. We're just lucky that we didn't get a big enough mega eruption or freak meteor in our most recent millennia. Why do we need a security system? No one has ever broken in. That was an actual statement from my boss. Whenever people say, Saturday Night Live just isn't as good as it used to be, I mean, it was always hit or miss, you just end up remembering the good skits. I've watched just about every season of SNL I could get my hands on, and it's been consistently hit or miss, if that makes sense. If I had to guess, for every great skit, there's about 5 bad or meh skits. Some episodes have been funnier than others, but there's no official peak, at least in my opinion. There were always going to be good and bad cast members, there's always going to be good or bad hosts, and there's always going to be good skits and cringy ones, and that's why I love it. I've watched SNL since the early 90s and have gone and watched older episodes on DVD. I think the biggest thing is that it seems like modern SNL has gone more political than before. Also, it seems like older SNL was okay with a weird skit being weird and not having an explanation. Though I do agree that it's always been hit and miss, I think some people just tire more quickly of political jokes and dismiss them. Dolphins have been known to help swimmers in distress by pushing them towards shore. Probably, they push swimmers in random directions, but the ones they pushed out to sea didn't live to tell about it. They don't make cars like they used to. And that's a good thing. Older cars were metal death traps with little to no safety features. People have this skewed idea that older cars were built better. The truth is, modern cars are faster, safer, and a heck of a lot better for the environment.
Medical anything. Appendicitis, broken bones, irritable bowels, losing or gaining weight, pregnancy, and my favorite, cancer.
When I had cancer, my doctor said ABC, and my naturopath said XYZ, and I XYX'd, and I was fine.
Yeah, your mole removal really compares to stage 3 colon cancer. Chest cancer is the absolute worst for these kinds of people.
Yeah, the saddest part of this is it's actually killing people. My mum saw a patient at a chiropractic office who, when the chiro took an x-ray of his back, noticed a spot on his lung. He went and got it checked out, and sure enough, cancer. It was in such an early stage, he didn't even have symptoms yet. He was 30 years old with a wife and young kid. The fact that he just happened to get an unrelated x-ray should have been the miracle that saved his fricking life. But did the guy listen to his doctor and do the crap he was supposed to be doing? No. He went the homeopathic route, started juicing, and stopped eating meat because apparently they think eating meat causes cancer. A year later, his cancer is now untreatable and he fricking died. Widowed his wife and left his young kid fatherless because he believed some crap like eating better was going to cure him by itself. Listen to your doctors, kids.
People who are really good with money usually don't stay poor their whole lives.
I was actually the one using this in an argument, and someone argued against me, saying that this was survivor bias, and I just kind of went, crap, they're right, and I conceded. Just because usually only people who are good with money become rich, it doesn't mean that everyone who's good with money becomes rich. Using seatbelts significantly increases the risk of dying with cancer. The incel movement. The people who grow as a person and get to the point where they can get a girlfriend leave the scene, and everyone who remains is still spouting the same old crap. Most shark attacks occur in shallow water near the shore. No crap, that's where people are. It's like saying that most car accidents happen on the roads. Sharks don't suddenly get docile when they're in deep water.
I made enough money working in the summer to pay for my college. Ugh, I heard that from so many older family members when I was in college and said I needed to take out loans.
You look them right in the eye and say thank you for fricking it up for the rest of us. I'm 50 and I remember when I was 12 or 13, a guy who worked construction painting jobs during a summer, and he would literally pay his tuition and spending money for the year. He was 19 or 20 at the time. Cost of attendance today at a public school is $30,000 to $40,000. How in the frick would anyone make that kind of money in 3 months without dealing substances or trafficking working girls? I mean, Jesus, are older people who went to college just that stupid and incompetent in math? Anyone who went to college and says this is a perfect example of how college prepares idiots. I was finally able to graduate at 46, and I'm grateful for the education, but it was one of the most self-destructive things I've ever done financially. Like, empirically stupid. My heart once again goes out to everyone who doesn't live in a country where you get reasonable student loans or even free university. The system is really stacking itself against you guys. Or at least against your citizens who aren't born into rich families. I tried talking to my OB-GYN about getting my tubes tied and she instantly refused, saying I should wait until I've already had at least one kid or I hit my mid-30s. I tell her I've never wanted kids and I'm sure of that. She said,
I hear too many stories of women who get their tubes tied before having kids and end up coming back regretting their decision and asking for a reversal.
That's because you're not going to hear about all the women who don't come back asking for a reversal. It would bother me less if my brother-in-law had to go through the same thing when he went in for a vasectomy at age 25. Music. Most people only remember the hits, not the thousands of duds that accompany each hit. While there's more bland, safe crap out there than ever before, the fact that it's so easy to make incredible music in a huge variety of genres makes me think we're actually in a second golden age of modern music. People will say, my parents hit me and I turned out fine, as a reason to hit their own children. Psychological science is increasingly showing that physical discipline does more harm than good, and just because one person turned out okay doesn't mean we should ignore the scientific evidence saying otherwise. Guys from bad neighborhoods describing their neighborhoods as good ones. For a common person, it's extremely unlikely to get robbed, murdered, or the unspeakable act in a bad district. You can live there for 5 or 10 years without something ever happening to you. It's another story for families. If you move in there with 3 children and your wife, the chance for something happening to one of your family members is likely. Psychiatric and neuropsychological disability. We see people who are successfully managing psychiatric disabilities of varying severity and assume that everyone can be helped with enough resources and support. We don't see those who are too disabled to function in a community setting, even with extensive treatment, and many people are unaware of how many mentally ill people are incarcerated. This is problematic because it creates the illusion that adequate treatment options exist for everyone, and allows blame for unmanaged disability to be shifted to the patient and their family, and prevents awareness of the need for greater funding for research and treatment. How did you survive your final destination moment? When I was around 7, I almost fell into the septic system in my yard. The access point was opened, and I didn't see it until my leg was dangling into a pit of number 2. The event scared me so badly that for at least 2 months, I didn't go into my yard. I was working at Walmart on the maintenance crew overnight. There was a blocked drain near the deli, and I had to dump some clog remover into it. No big deal. I walked up and found that someone had jammed a wet floor sign into the drain gate. So I yanked it out, didn't know if the clog remover would bleach it or something, and in pulling out the sign, I also moved the drain cover. I dumped in about a gallon of the stuff, that's what they told me to do, and I figured that was that. I took off my gloves, tossed them into the trash can near me, and then I noticed the grate was shifted. With a lack of sense, because I was a teenager after all, I put my hand into the water and moved the drain back into place. No big deal, I just saved everyone's loose change from falling into the drain. I walked into the back and was doing something else for a bit and kind of noticed my hand was sort of itchy. I have eczema, so being itchy was nothing new. I went on to grab a broom with the hand that I'd put in the drain, and the broom stung my hand. I look all over the broom and nothing was sharp, so I took a look at my hand. My hand was turning deep red all over. My nails were deep yellow and floppy. I was covered in red bumps and there was a black patch forming on top of my hand. I thought it was some massive allergic reaction, so I took some Benadryl and went to find the manager. The manager was nowhere to be found. He was an alcoholic who would sleep off hangovers in the meeting room, so I went to a friend of mine that was also on the maintenance team. He screamed. Not the reaction I was hoping for. He damn near dragged me into the bathroom and told me to turn on the faucet and keep my hand under it, so I did. He runs out like he's on a mission, then comes back in with the manager. I chat with the manager for a bit and get sent to the hospital. Apparently, it wasn't an allergic reaction. The doctor told me it was the natural reaction of someone's skin to industrial-strength drain cleaner. My skin was developing a massive chemical burn, and if I'd let it go or not noticed it as soon as I did, it could have burned through my skin, into my blood, and laid me out. I fell almost 200 feet off a mountain in Colorado. The narrator would like to note that the individual who submitted this very short story is called Mountain Lover. I do wonder if they created that profile name before or after their life and death moment. I suppose we'll never know. I was around 11 months old at the time and was always a very playful baby. My mum was cooking something up in the kitchen and let me play in my crib. I was very giggly and would make noises, so my mum knew I was okay. However, at a certain point, she stopped hearing me make noises completely, and I previously took a nap, so she knew something was wrong. She found me not breathing in the crib and immediately dialed 911 and tried mouth-to-mouth, but nothing was working. She felt like the ambulance was taking too long, so she picked me up and ran down the stairs of our apartment complex to look for help. Coincidentally, there was a police officer just about to leave, responding from a call, and he noticed my mother bawling her eyes out. The police officer rushed us to the sick kids hospital here in Toronto, and luckily we lived 10 minutes from the hospital. The ER was able to revive me within 5 minutes. The ER team later told my mum if it was 10 minutes longer, I would have died. It still brings chills when I think about the story. Probably the most frightful thing for any parent to go through. Worked in a 120-year-old building where the elevators were built to be operated by people, not computers. They put in push buttons, but there were always people there working on the elevators. They never seemed to work right over all the years I've worked there. I can't remember a time when they weren't trying to fix at least one of the elevators. One day I was riding an elevator down and it suddenly just stopped. Sat there for 10 seconds or so, then it jumped about 3 or 4 feet and instantly dropped about a floor. It then slowed back to normal speed and stopped again. The weird thing was that nobody screamed, nobody talked, and nobody made any sounds. We all pretty much just assumed we were about to fall to our deaths. But then there was a weird electric feeling as we just waited to see what would happen. Waiting, not moving, total silence. Instead of plummeting us to our deaths, the elevator then just resumed its normal course to the next floor and opened. I hit a deer while in a VW Rabbit. Deer head smashed through the windshield and pushed the glass into within a few inches of my face. Only the layer of plastic designed to keep the windshield together kept it from decapitating me. My face was filled with broken glass, which is really awful because you can't pick it out, and when you try to brush it off, it drives all the little slivers deeper in and they hurt more. I'm convinced I still have glass shards in my face that will remain there forever. In a final act of revenge, the deer spun around and its butt simultaneously busted my back window and left Doody on the rear seat. I got hit in the head with a lawn dart once. It just bounced off. I was 40 years old when I did this. Stupid, I know, but I'm still here to tell you not to do it. I live next to train tracks in the city of Houston. One very foggy winter night, I went for a walk on the train tracks. I heard a distant train and saw the glow of the light. I turned around and started running back towards home. The tracks are lined with tall weeds, meaning that there was no real area to jump off into without getting dirty, scratched, and wet. I was going for the break through the weeds, where I got onto the tracks. The train was closer than I thought due to the fog. It was getting louder and the light was brighter. The horn was blaring. I was running and I tripped. I fell flat between the rails. I jumped up, jumped into the weeds, and the train shot past, horn screaming. With some presence of mind, I marked the spot where I was with a chunk of wood. I got up after the train passed, went home, got a flashlight, and came back to my marked spot. After a bit of searching, I found my glasses in the rocks between the rails. I never told my wife or my boys about my misadventure. I want you to quit tomorrow and look for a job at the library. Books can't kill you. Signed, your concerned mother.
As someone who works in the library, I'd beg to differ. The 700 pagers are just murder waiting to happen.
I was doing one of those assault course things that we all do as a child. Harness and safety gear on, as we all do. I must have been around 11 or 12. Headed up on the rock wall and had to leap onto some sort of pole thing that had a platform on it from the top of the wall. Anyway, I'm on this platform, and next I have to head across the monkey bars to finish the course. So I jump across onto the bars when suddenly the harness snapped. I was essentially about 50 feet from the ground and impending death, so I had to get to the end of the monkey bars. Luckily I did, and I made it to the bottom unscathed but shaken up. In short, I'm Spider-Man. Also, I'm told that when I was born and flying out of my mother's ladyhood, I was about to fall and land on my head and my dad actually caught me. I cannot confirm whether or not this is true as I can't remember it. So it kinda just seems like the universe just sort of wants this commenter to die by falling from a great height. Take note of this, author, and don't let me go on a cable car with you anytime soon. When I was 15, my mum was driving me to school, and since it was rather early in the morning, she fell asleep at the wheel for a second. The road in question had no curb, and to make matters worse, it was right beside a salt marsh. Needless to say, water almost up to the bottom of the windows, which we got out of. To make matters even worse, I don't like being wet. It was not a good day. Alright, let's talk about my 2011, shall we? First, I was walking to school. Just got a text with some bad news from a friend. Distracted, I looked up and saw a car slowing to a stop at a crosswalk. I did not check to see if she saw me. She did not. As I stepped out, she slammed into me, pushing me into oncoming traffic, and due to perfect timing, she pushed me between two cars as they passed, and I managed to awkwardly dance out of death's way. Much crying on both of our parts ensued. The second event was when I got a moped. It was windy as frick in Hawaii, and I'm not experienced at all at moped riding. I was coming home from work and a huge gust of wind caught me off guard. I overcorrected and ended up tipping over while going forward, again almost getting caught under the wheels of an oncoming car. Luckily, they stopped right a few inches short, and my moped kept going right into someone's front lawn. Much crying ensued. The third was when my fiancé came over to visit during the Christmas break. It had been very windy for the previous week. And on Christmas Day, we were walking around in the military park down by Waikiki. We stopped for a few minutes to look at this plant and exchanged to each other how it looked like the top of an enormous onion. We continued walking and suddenly there was this horrible creaking. I will never forget that sound, this inexorable, monstrous death rattle. We both looked up at the huge tree above us for falling branches. Nope, no falling branches. The entire fricking tree is tipping over directly onto us. I felt my fiancé bolt from my side and immediately followed him. He has better situational awareness, and when I felt him run, I was like, crap, better run too. We could feel the leaves brushing us as we fled. Had we not stopped to look at the plant, we would have been too far under the tree to make it out. A huge branch fell just where we had been standing. The author at this point says that there was much furious effing, but I'm not sure whether they meant they were swearing or doing the deed. So that's up to you, listeners. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This didn't happen to me, but it almost killed my best friend. When I was in 8th grade, my buddies and I were messing around after we'd just finished school. We found this enormous exercise ball that was shaped like a large pill. Anyway, it was really fun to dropkick this sucker to each other in the gym while a large amount of small children run around. We were already setting up a good situation, right? Anyway, we were having fun kicking it around and it was my turn to pass it to someone. I grabbed it and kicked the living crap out of it. It sailed high enough to scrape the ceiling of the gym, and we were watching the trajectory down when all of a sudden, I spotted my friend who was walking away from me after I'd kicked it. I yelled at him to watch out, but it was too late and the ball hit him on the top of the head slightly to the side. I stood in horror as I watched his ear touch his right shoulder, and this was all his neck bending, mind you. His shoulder hadn't moved an inch. Luckily, he didn't die or get paralyzed, and to this day we're still good friends. And sometimes he says the vertebrae pop in his neck if he bends it too far to that side. I'll preface this story by saying that I'm a triplet and it's more my brother's story than mine. My brothers and I are fairly good skiers, and this year our family went on vacation to Snowbird, Utah to ski. We're able to pretty much handle the entire mountain, including all of the tree skiing and hardest slopes. Well, our parents, who aren't as confident taking risks while skiing, usually let us go off on our own, and we go to do all the crazy stuff that we want. If anyone here knows how it is skiing out west, they'll understand how easy it is to ski down the mountain out of bounds and get to areas where you're just like, crap, there's no way I can get down. So, at the top of the mountain, we see some people who look like pretty nice skiers start out across the mountain through the trees. Of course, our teenage invincibility perspective took over, and we were soon following these people further and further from the trails. Eventually, these people find a reasonably skiable area and head down, but being the idiots we are, we continue on a small narrow path across the mountain. As we got a bit further, we finally come to the realization that, crap, we're screwed, since we can't go back and the only way down was literally the steepest slope combined with natural obstacles, tree roots, rocks, etc., all ending in a 15 to 25 foot drop off a cliff. My one brother makes it down through a combination of sliding, skidding, and sheer determination not to fall, but to make matters worse, my other brother, before even going down, falls and his boots come out of his skis. This is where the idiot has his near-death experience as he tries to put his skis back on this steep slope. At this moment, some really chill dude skis in expertly and goes, "Hey, what's good guys, trying to catch some cliff?" To which my brother replies sarcastically, "That was the plan." Not showing his brightest moment and emboldened by this bro skier, he tries to stomp his left boot back into his ski, causing him to overbalance, and I mean the next part literally, fall head over heels down the mountain. My first reaction was, oh crap, my brother just fricking died and I'm stuck at the top of this stupid ski slope. Surprisingly, other than some bruises, he seemed to be okay, but this left me at the top with all of his ski stuff to get down. I managed to make it all the way down to the cliff drop, bigger than any other I'd attempted previously. By this time, we had a small crowd of spectators in the middle of the trail that the cliff shot out onto. With only this last bit, and in front of this crowd, not wanting to look like a scrub, I propelled myself forward screaming, "For Narnia," and went off the edge. Needless to say, despite my heroic battle cry, I leaned too far forward and did an impromptu front flip, crash landing into a snowbank. Luckily, the snowbank was so soft, so I didn't get hurt, and of course, I tried to play it off as intentional. Unfortunately, this experience only increased our confidence that we would never get hurt, and we continued skiing aggressively for the rest of the vacation. By the way, don't question the "Fanania cry," as it was the first thing that came to mind. I think everyone who's gone beyond beginner level of skiing or snowboarding has experienced something that at least seems like a near-death experience before. The narrator too has accidentally flown over his fair share of cliffs and emerged miraculously unharmed. When I was going to school out of town, I had about a 2-hour commute from home to school, straight shot on the interstate. I was coming home one weekend for a show and grabbed some fast food for the road, popped in a CD and enjoyed the ride. About 2 weeks before this trip, I bought my first car, so I was stoked to drive anywhere. I was about halfway through my ride when I suddenly woke up to the rumble strips on the road. Next thing I know, the car fishtails and flips off the road and on the side of a hill. It lands on the driver's side and I managed to climb out of the car from the passenger window, because the window still worked, and escaped while the car was smoking and completely effed. I laid on the grass until someone stopped by, calling 911, and I went to the hospital. Somehow I walked away with only a few stitches in my arm. Once, my girlfriend asked if I thought a friend of hers was pretty. I said yes. Oof. A woman decided to text while going 75 to 80 miles per hour on the interstate and almost mowed me down. She then gave me the finger. That's the third time this month I've been in a car that almost got hit because the other driver was messing with their phone. I'm 16 and I got my license last week. I'm a decent driver who doesn't make dangerous decisions, and I don't want to worry about dying the next time I'm on the road because you just had to get that text or email or call out. Unless you're calling 911 because you're dying, put down your fricking phones. Oh, I have two. When I was a kid, my friend pulled out his BB gun, pointed it at my forehead about 2 inches away and pulled the trigger. Nothing. Then he pointed it at the ceiling and pulled the trigger again. That time it discharged. I'm not an expert on BB guns, but I think it would have penetrated my skull. Then in college, my girlfriend and I were driving in an unfamiliar city after dark. We were both looking at a map and drifted out onto a red light. We got plowed into by a Ford Super Duty towing a boat going 40 to 50 miles an hour, hitting our front driver's side quarter panel and sending both vehicles on opposite directions. If we'd been going 2 miles per hour faster, it would have impacted my door and undoubtedly killed me. I was 15 or 16 and went to a pool with my friend. I don't know how to swim and told him over and over again. He said, don't worry, he's actually trained, so he's got me. So my idiot self jumped into the 6-foot deep end. I was flapping around while he just stood there. I went all the way down and then pushed myself up, slowly moved to a corner and got out. Turns out he didn't know how to swim. When I was 10, we lived beside train tracks, and for some reason I was allowed to walk on them because the train only came once a day. Great parenting. My friend and I looked behind us one day to see the train coming around the bend. There was nowhere to jump off the tracks because of high rock ledges on each side. I took off running, leaving my friend behind, and made it to a spot just ahead with a drop-off into a rocky ravine. I jumped in and my friend came after. We weren't hurt, but I'll never forget seeing the front of the train directly behind me. I didn't tell my parents until I was about 35. I drowned in a wading pool when I was 12. My neighbor pulled me out, held me upside down to drain the water out of my lungs, and got me breathing again. I don't remember any of it, but my mum told me about it afterwards. I used to work in a computer shop. It was a mum-and-pop computer store that sold custom-built machines and repaired PCs. 2 occasions come to mind. First, I was holding a motherboard in one hand and the power switch for the PC in the other. I pushed the power button with my right thumb and must have been touching some part of it that screamed conductive, because the next thing I knew, every muscle in my arms and torso were clenched like it's minus 80 degrees and the motherboard is smoking. Some sort of fuse must have popped somewhere because as quick as it happened, it was over, and nothing worked anymore. To this day, when I smell burning electronics, my chest twinges. Second, much like the first, only this time involving a faulty power strip. I have my left hand over the center of the strip as I'm unplugging something with my right. Next thing I know, the center of my left hand feels like the solar side of Mercury on a summer's day, and my right hand no longer wants to cooperate with commands. Again, bless you fuses, because I am able to forcibly eject the offending power strip across the room with nothing more than an utterance of obscenities. While writing this, remembering a third time where, as a child, I had a chain, much like those used to attach pens to desks, inside banks, except each little bearing was 3 times larger. I was possessed with the notion that lowering one end of it into the open socket of a plugged-in lamp might be a good idea. Fortunately, I let go of the chain at the last moment and just let it drop. The entire length of the chain lit up in a blue that can only be described as an electric blue, but still is not given homage by the most detailed video game. In that briefest of moments, I smelled the universe. Creation itself was laid bare for my olfactory senses. If you can get high off ozone, I did it that night. The fact that it shorted out half the house and I had to explain to my dad what happened was a minor after effect in my memory. It would seem electricity is my arch nemesis. I've had 2 cars die to the point of needing replacement due to severe electrical problems. If electricity is my mutant power now, I fear I'm doing it terribly wrong. What cringe moment did you catch on camera at a wedding? The father of the groom was making his speech and got to a touching part about his wife, mother of the groom, who had passed away recently. I was filming from the back, but I got his sound okay. The thing is, there was a bunch of little kids near me playing quietly until one of them yelled, "God damn it, frick you!" right as the father was tearing up. Nobody seemed to notice, but it was plain as day on the tape, so I had to do a lot of delicate chopping on that one. My great-uncle took over filming at the reception of my parents' wedding, and halfway through it, it cuts to inside of the kitchen, where he's filming and hitting on the waitress getting the cake ready. It's both of my parents' favorite moment of the tape. When my brother got married, I was one of the bridesmaids. It was a super fun wedding, but my sister-in-law, the bride, got tanked during the reception. She threw up in the bathroom at one point. During the part where the bride throws the bouquet, we had to get her up there, hand her the flowers, and just tell her to throw. So I'm in the crowd to catch it, and I'm pretty tall for a girl at 5'10", so I was the tallest there. She drunkenly throws it and it beelines to my face. Of course, the bouquet was made of succulents. I had cuts under my eye for about a week and my cousin had the entire thing on camera from a side angle. It looks like a comedy sketch. Also, I didn't get the bouquet because I was too preoccupied with getting hit in the face. My aunt had a camera floating around for anyone to use at her wedding. While my dad was filming, one of the bridesmaids spilled a bottle of red wine on the center table of the room. It knocked a bunch of stuff off the table as well as making the white tablecloth red. Well, my father was facing the wrong way, so when you watch the video, there's a crashing sound, then my father spins around and says very clearly, "Frickin' crap, I missed it," as the bridesmaid is scrambling to stop the chaos. Funniest part of the video by far. Oh, my clip was from my own wedding. We got married in a dear friend's front garden I'd helped put together as a teenager. Just as we got to the vows, you can hear people sniffling, just about to cry, when the telltale sound of an ice cream van starts to build. It gets louder and louder until it abruptly stops. The driver obviously noticed what they were approaching and shut off the music at what was essentially the property line to the next-door neighbor. Silence as they crept by the house. Then, as soon as they hit the next house, full blast again. The "Do Your Ears Hang Low" tune. Everyone burst out laughing. They should have come by 10 minutes later. They would have made a lot of money. That is the most alternately considerate and inconsiderate ice cream driver I've ever heard of. Honestly, if it wasn't the reception, I can't think of any wedding I've been to that wouldn't have benefited from an ice cream truck right after the service. You know, when you're waiting for the bride and groom to get their first photos in. My sister-in-law was trying to use the wedding photographer as a personal photographer or something to take photos of her family. She's denied this for 4 months until we all watched the video from the videographer that caught her literally saying, "The bride said that she wants you to take the pictures of our families." So the photographer missed a good 20 minutes of the reception to take pictures of her and her family, and then came to us and was like, "Hey, we didn't discuss this," and tells me what the sister-in-law said. I went to her and she denied it all and said, "Oh, the photographer told us that she wanted to take pictures of the family members." Although it was only her and her family, which we weren't on good terms with anyway, they weren't even invited. So months later we were sitting around watching footage, and just like a scene from The Office, you see and hear with perfect clarity
"Oh, the bride wants you to take pictures of the families, not the reception. We're ready when you are."
And the sister-in-law was sitting in the corner of the room and stomped her way to the door and slammed it as she left. A number of years ago, in my early 20s, I went to my cousin's wedding. My father asked me to dance, and it was going quite well until he asked to dip me. I said no. I was pretty big at the time and figured he couldn't support my weight and would drop me. He was rather disappointed and the dance ended soon after. About 3 dances later, I hear him calling my name across the dance floor. I look up and he's gleefully dancing with my mother and shouts, "Hey Bethany, this is how you dip someone," and promptly dips my mother and drops her straight onto the floor. All proudly caught on video and still referenced at every family wedding to this day. I've filmed dozens of weddings. I put a wireless mic on the groom in a lot of cases, so I get everything he mutters before, during, and after the ceremony. Most of my cutting was audio related. Lots of guys' buddies telling them they have a chance to run, serious or not. My favorite, though, was walking down the aisle after the ceremony and the groom whispers to the bride, "We're getting it on as soon as we leave this church." And the bride gave him this hilarious look, and they were basically jogging out of the church. And everything the guests filmed on the video guest book was delivered, good or bad. Definitely had a drunk aunt go on a 15-minute tirade once, and lots of raunchy stories from drunk friends of the bride and groom, but nothing that stands out as too WTF. We made the mistake of deciding to set ours up ourselves on a tripod in the rear of the chapel and just letting it roll. The plan would have been brilliant if not for the fact that it got bumped when someone walked past, and was instead filming a nice, solid shot of one of the uncles fighting a particularly stubborn wedgie for way too long. He turns up plastered to anything from a christening to Christmas carols. Luckily, an aunt helped fix the camera. She noticed it and adjusted it eventually. Filming the father of the bride speech, he mumbled his way through it, and the guest in front of me said, "Well, that was frickin' crap," and only then remembered I was behind him filming and sheepishly looked around into the camera. At a friend's wedding, the videographer was filming a beautiful moment where the bride's sister, brother, and mother were dancing together. Near the end of the dance, her father came and stood behind the videographer and said, "This would be a beautiful picture if that B word wasn't in it." Him and the bride's mother weren't on the best of terms after their divorce. Not me, but my buddy was the videographer for a wedding. During the ceremony, they had candles lining the aisle, and the mother of the bride decided to get closer so she could get a better picture. While she was taking photos, she started walking backwards. Well, she walked backwards right into one of the candle holders and knocked it over right into someone's lap. Commence chaos. The guy jumps up, trying to put out the fire that's now in his lap, and his wife starts screaming at the women. Took about 20 minutes to get everything calmed down, and the marriage went off without a hitch afterwards. And yes, it was all caught on camera. The bride insisted it be cut out at the final video, so my buddy put it on a separate tape for us all to laugh at later. My husband filmed at my sister's wedding, and we got a lovely shot of a page boy taking a tinkle in the bushes during the outdoor photos. My cousin is a professional videographer and he did my wedding. I don't think he cut any of the audio because there's definitely a conversation about my husband and father going on a substance raid with some dogs after the wedding. FYI, they're both accountants and neither of them has a dog. One unforeseen side effect of having my husband mic'd up like that is that you can hear every conversation we had in our receiving line. I really love that part because a whole bunch of people died shortly after our wedding and that was the last we saw of them. What? That was a right turn that the narrator wasn't expecting, and it leaves so many questions. Were they all old and died of natural causes? Did the hotel most of the guests were staying at burn down? Sorry, I know it's not funny, but wow, was the food undercooked? I guess we'll never know. Vaguely related, my aunt did the whole disposable cameras on tables thing, along with a professional team, and she got quite a few pictures of gentlemen's downstairs areas. We had a teenage creeper use our disposable cameras. He was taking stalker-like photos of these 3 teenage girls. We had several cameras worth of these girls, from afar and never looking at the photographer. I don't even know why he did it. He was never going to keep the pictures. We did this about 15 years ago at our wedding. Most of the cameras came back with fun shots, but the most memorable one was one that lovingly documented every inch of a fire extinguisher near one of the tables. Like, they set up shots with dramatic lighting, came at it from skewed angles, and must have done a full photo shoot. I don't know where these pictures are now. They reflected dedication to an apparently otherwise unsung hero of weddings. At my brother's, they specified no Johnsons on their disposable cameras, and they got an entire camera full of women's bare chests instead. The funniest thing to get caught on camera during a wedding, we were in Jamaica and a couple was getting married on a crowded resort beach. A large drunk guy waded into the water and went directly behind the bride and groom, like 10 feet back. He keeps trying to get onto one of those floating things anchored in the water and falling off again and again. The guests and people around are just watching this guy try to hold his drink, falling all over the place, floating around. It was hilarious and really embarrassing to watch. When we were at my cousin's wedding, my mother fell a total of 3 times. All 3 times, my dad, me, or one of the other 2 siblings weren't around, so we didn't really believe she kept tripping over her dress. That was until the last day when she had a bruise the size of Eurasia on her thigh. We were left scratching our heads like, how? And then the video for the wedding came out, along with the bloopers. In the bloopers, you can see my mother hopping around with her friend and doing bad Irish dancing when she lands, catches the hem of her dress, skids and falls backwards over said friend before baiting herself off the floor. Through the tears, I felt kinda bad for her. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Happened to my parents at their wedding and didn't get removed from the video. When they got out of their limo, some kid on a bike came up to them and yelled, "Get the frick out of here, you don't belong here." The kid must have been only 7 or 8 and the wedding was in my mum's hometown. I don't think we took ours out of the video because it was so funny. A Catholic wedding, drinking of the wine at communion. There was quite a bit of wine left after everyone went though. Most times I've seen the priest just finish it off. For some reason, this guy wants the parishioners to finish it, but everyone is having a hard time figuring out what he wants. He wants everyone to go through again and nobody gets it. My brother reaches over, takes the chalice, and pounds the remaining wine. Lays it back on the altar. My mum filmed weddings for a long time. Once, the groom was so drunk he could barely dance with his new wife. He was stumbling around, groping his new wife, and even grabbing her butt and thrusting. Super inappropriate bride and groom dance. The bride was so embarrassed. She was just trying to settle him down with no success. This was obviously in front of all the family and guests. My mum made me watch as a lesson in self-control, respect, and humiliation. Mine was my wedding, and we didn't have it removed, nor would we have, but the camera didn't pick up the audio. So when you look at the video, you see us making our vows, then the whole wedding party laughing, and then it continues. What happened was the ring bearer, a little boy of 3 or 4, during the vows where I'm asked, "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" And this kid says, not quietly, "You mean he doesn't have to marry her?" It just blew his mind that a guy would willingly marry a girl. I used to videotape weddings for a few years. The funniest thing I saw was during a dollar dance, like the honeymoon dance, and a guest went to dance with the bride, gave her a $20 bill and asked for change. At another wedding, they had little bottles of bubbles instead of rice so that guests could blow bubbles on the couple as they left the church. One boy, about 10, would take a mouthful of bubbles and blow it out instead of using the little dipper. He made better bubbles than anyone. My dad used to videotape and photograph weddings when I was a kid, including my cousin's wedding. My cousin and I have an age gap. I was 3 at his wedding. My dad was photographing things and my mum was acting as his assistant, and no one was watching me. So, naturally, I found my way to the pretty cake, and very uncharacteristically of me, even as a small child, I walked right up and swiped a fistful of it before it was cut. My mum was frantically trying to cover it up when my cousin saw, and he was a good sport about it. Didn't really matter in the end anyway. My cousin was a Marine at the time, and one of his superiors was the one to cut the cake. He sliced it in half with a broadsword. No one cared about my sideswipe in the end. This does beg the question of whether this last guy was meant to cut the cake with his sword or not. It's kind of left open as to whether this was a spur-of-the-moment thing. Maybe he got really blotto and decided to vanquish this tiny rival bride and groom for them. My dad makes these videos. The fashion for ludicrous choreographed dances was at its height. The bride had forced her reluctant groom to dance classes, dancing to "I've Had the Time of My Life." So, their big moment arrived, and the room collapsed into laughter. The first 2 verses were just them facing each other about 6 feet apart, swaying and clicking their fingers. As the song reaches its climax, she was supposed to run and leap into his arms. They didn't get that far. The bride ran off in tears. My dad had to calm her down and then make an announcement to the room that they must let them have their moment. They did the dance again, and nobody spoke of it afterwards. My dad is into photography as a hobby. He has a bunch of expensive cameras and loves shooting in all kinds of settings, so he volunteered to be a photographer at one of his co-workers' weddings. They had an actual professional photographer there as well, but decided to let my dad get in on the action since he takes a damn good photo. He was snapping random shots all night and took a nice photo of the bride and groom dancing with some other couples. There were tables in the background of the photo and people eating on said tables. There, in the far back center, was a man and a woman sitting at one of the tables. In the woman's hand was the man's Johnson. I guess she thought she'd be able to service him while everyone else was distracted with alcohol and dancing. Both of them have straight faces and you couldn't tell that anything was going on. There were background characters in the shot, so it wasn't noticeable if you weren't looking for it. My dad caught this when he was editing the photos and decided to just darken the backgrounds in a way that you couldn't see this guy's junk in his wife and girlfriend or random drunk woman's hand. He didn't delete it because it was a really good photo of the bride and groom and he really wanted to send it to his coworker. He never told the coworker about the whole eggplant part, and I believe the couple has the photo in their collection of framed wedding photos. So I was actually the photographer and a buddy of mine was doing video, so this is a bit secondhand. We're standing with the groom at the end of a long walkway, getting ready to do their first look. We're bantering at this point, talking about our dogs and life and whatnot, when we hear a faint but distinct moan. You see, we were standing in the hotel's garden and there were rooms all around us. A U-shaped hotel, basically, and some couple on the left side of the U was having themselves a grand time. Anyway, we chuckled a bit and I asked my buddy, you're not going to have any of this audio in there, right? And my buddy laughs and says, well, not anymore. Just then, the bride enters the garden from the base of the U. So we're supposed to capture this super romantic moment. Meanwhile, 2 people are going at it like it might be their last opportunity to do so. The woman sounded like she was enjoying herself because each moan got progressively louder. We figured they had to be closer to the tip of the U because the bride didn't seem to notice as she approached. Thankfully, the noise stopped when she made it to the groom and they had their cute little moment uninterrupted. Fast forward a few months and they're coming into the studio to pick up their video. They watch the quick cut and are very pleased, but then the bride asks us a question we didn't expect. Hey, did you guys get any audio from that couple having loud whoopee? Of course she heard it. How couldn't she? None of us knew she was aware of it because she had played it off so perfectly. Probably for the sake of the video. My buddy went to his editing station and quickly threw together a version of their first look with the original audio, complete with a ding counter for each audible moan. They watched it, laughed hysterically, and thanked us for keeping it. So while it was removed from the cutesy version of the video, the couple was really glad to have it to keep in their personal funny cut. Honestly, good on them for enjoying the memory. I know a lot of bride and groomzillas who would let something like that ruin the memory of the entire day for them. Personally, I would have found it hilarious. Used to be a video guy in the 80s and 90s. Shot probably around 500 weddings, I'd guess, so there were lots of things that had to be edited out. Some of the more memorable ones were the time the brother of the groom stripped completely undressed on the dance floor in full view of everyone, the time when giving a congratulatory interview on camera, the very drunk bridesmaid started deep-throating the microphone, many wardrobe malfunctions, like you'd be surprised at how often chests pop out of dresses, especially during the bouquet toss, several fistfights and pushing and screaming matches, the mother of the bride screaming at the best man during his toast. In this case, she was furious about something. She wound up walking up to him and spitting in his face. So that was fun. The time the groomsman wrote, "I'm screwed" on the bottom of the groom shoes with a white marker or something. Every time he kneeled down in church, the whole place could see it. The father of the groom having a heart attack on the dance floor at the reception. A woman at another reception slicing her foot wide open on some broken glass. Blood spurting everywhere, getting all over the bride's dress as well. And the table that held the wedding cake collapsing when they were cutting it. It fell all over the bride and groom. The bride was hysterically crying. And there were more, believe me. In my wife and I's wedding video, we were watching it a few weeks post-wedding, and out of nowhere there's this guy I've never seen before just standing there, holding up a greeting card with an undressed male model on it with his eggplant fully exposed. We were both watching the video like, what the frick is this crap? And when we pressed him, he said the mother of the bride's friend wanted to hold up the card for the camera and kept pestering him about it. The cameraman didn't want any part of it, but my mother-in-law told him to go along anyway. So yeah, there's full frontal undressed male in my wedding video. It was 2005 and it was in VHS. Too much hassle to remove. I didn't really care all that much. Who watches their wedding video more than a couple of times anyway? I wasn't a videographer, but was a DJ. My partner and I had set up the equipment and done our tests. When the wedding party and guests arrived, we did our final mic checks to make sure everything would be ready for the first dance. When we checked the wireless mic, I noticed there was a lot of static in it, so I asked my partner to walk around the venue while talking into the mic to see if I could get any idea what was going on. I put the microphone into cue and put on a pair of headphones to listen as he walked around. He started by saying test, 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 and then he would walk by a guy and go ball bag, ball bag, ball bag, and then go by a woman and say chest, 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 and pretty soon he was just walking around the banquet hall saying ball bag, chest, ball bag, chest, chest. He does this around the entire perimeter of the facility until he gets back to me. When he got back, I told him that there was too much static and we would just need to switch to the wired mic. Once we got things switched over, I decided to work on the wireless a little more, so I turned off the transmitter and just listened to the static from the receiver. After 30 seconds or so, I started to pick out voices and thought to myself, oh crap. And I started looking around and sure enough, there's the videographer talking to his partner and their mouths match up with the voices I'm hearing. Turns out, his wireless mic was on the same frequency as ours, so my partner possibly caused chest, chest, ball bag, to be recorded on this couple's tape of their cherished memories. What's your "I'm not even supposed to be here today" story? When I was in middle school, my mum went to work before I woke up, so I always got myself to school alone. On this particular rainy, windy day, I decided to accidentally sleep in till 11 a.m. I lived in northern Colorado where there are hardly any tornadoes, but when I turned on the TV, there was a serious tornado warning for my exact area. We lived in a tiny apartment on the 3rd floor, and all of the neighbors were kinda sketchy. So I was alone and panicking, just wishing I'd gone to school. By then, the weather was too severe to walk the mile to my school, so I hid in the bathroom and accepted my fate, and eventually the weather cleared up. Missed my flight off Kauai and got on the next flight to Oahu. Flight was 20 minutes. Takeoff was fine and we were ascending normally, until the plane jolted with such severity as I rose out of my seat, I saw a flight attendant hit their head on the ceiling. People started screaming. The plane was tossed up and down and whipped side to side. I grabbed the arms to my chair like it was a jetpack and held on for dear life. This continued for whole minutes. All I could think was, this is how I die. I'm not even supposed to be on this flight. What a terrible way to end this vacation. Eventually it stopped and the pilot came on over intercom and apologized for the turbulence and told us that the drink service would be suspended. I don't care about juice at this point, buddy. Get this plane on the fricking ground. Working in a thrift store, covering another manager's shift so she could take her birthday off. Right after I clock in, I see a woman stuffing her purse with used bras and undies and then try to make a run for the front door. I got as far as saying, "Excuse me, ma'am," before she screams and upends her extra-large Taco Bell cup full of Mountain Dew Livewire over my head. She runs into the street and everyone in the store stares at me while I'm dripping in orange bullcrap. I got to work the next 8 hours with sticky, citrus-scented hair. Worked in fast food. Anyways, this one night it was crazy busy and some people had called in. Here I am wanting to check my schedule, but I noticed the massive lines. The one really super chill manager looks at me and motions for me to come to the back and tells me if any of the other managers caught me I would be stuck here all night. It was Friday night and I just wanted to go out and drink. So she literally grabbed me by the collar and dragged me out the back door and closed it behind me. Best boss ever. Nice. Yep, if that was my teenage job at McDonald's, that would be me hauled behind the counter, given an extra shirt, and stuck for the next 5 hours. Lucky you. Also, your boss is very different to literally every other fast food manager in the world, so congrats on that. Not me, but as I'm getting dressed for work as a paramedic, a coworker messages to ask if we can switch stations. I was station A and he was station B. In my mind, the stations were about the same, but people usually prefer station A. I say that's fine and I go to station B. I proceed to get 0 calls. He was busy the entire shift, including a guy that went into cardiac arrest while driving and hit another car and a tree, and the initial dispatch reported the passenger as being unconscious as well. I heard it all on the radio. He texted me later in the night like, "I'm never swapping with you again." In short, coworker tried to swap for the better station and got screwed. Supposed to be on our honeymoon, but didn't have enough money to go anywhere, so we were hiding from family for the week. Been kinda nice. Came in on my day off because someone called out. Got rewarded with the hands-down worst bite in my 5 years as a groomer. 4 deep punctures, 2 ended up abscessing, and I got a bone infection despite immediate treatment and antibiotics. The constant bandage changes ended up ripping bits off my skin, so I have scars, not just from the bite, but also the bandaging. Everyone who says, "But all you do is play with puppies all day," to a groomer is full of crap. Reluctantly was taking a trip to Hartford, Connecticut one weekend, and on the way caught a flat tire. A friend drives a Lexus, which requires a custom key to remove the tire. I didn't have the key and had to be towed to an auto shop to have the wheel busted off. The whole process took about 2.5 hours, and we were hungry and cranky, so we decided to stop off at a random bar we saw on Yelp, and we head straight there. I walk in and the owner is crazy excited, like running around the bar excited to see us. He insists we sit at the bar with him and he tells us we're his first lunch customers ever. Serves us amazing food. We stay for a while for some drinks with him and we have a good time. Later, a few girls walk in and he's only slightly less excited to see them. This dude had crazy energy. Have a good time for the rest of the night there and end up dating one of the girls we met that night for 3 or 4 months. Really an enjoyable time. The bar was called the Clydesdale Pub. Not actually in Hartford, but it's close in Port Chester, New York. Definitely recommend checking it out if you're in the area. He was serving what he called Brazilian dumplings at the time that were just amazing. I was almost sold into a working girl ring as an infant. I was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where my biological parents basically listed me on the black market, intending to sell me for profit. Much to my fortune, a group that posed as buyers on the black market but was actually an adoption agency, or at least worked closely with one, arranged to buy me, then proceeded to literally steal me in a van and spirit me away to Rio. There I was kept safe, and at 9 months of age, a wonderful young couple from Pennsylvania flew down to meet me and take me home forever. I'm now living a fantastic life that was gifted to me against unimaginable odds, and I'm thankful for it every day. And I'm thankful to those who made it possible, whoever they may be. They must have had hearts of gold and boundless courage to enter dangerous situations like that to help the helpless and innocent children like myself. Co-worker's granddad died. I was supposed to be on holiday, but ended up covering her shift. I got there and was informed I needed to fire someone. Well, not exactly. They weren't on high enough warnings yet, so I had to convince her to quit. As a note, I'd properly fired her boyfriend 2 months prior for an unrelated reason. After that was done, an ex-staff member sent me a crapload of annoyed messages that they hadn't gotten a leaving card or gift. I explained that A, they'd given away their last shifts, meaning that we didn't have time to organize anything, and B, it's never been one of my jobs to organize leaving cards or gifts. There were 2 other people assigned to the job. Finally, I'd bought another coworker a leaving gift with my own money on my own time, which had nothing to do with work. Also, a kid chucked up. Everywhere. 11-hour shift in my holiday time, never again. Not my story, but a classmate's. My friend got a baby duck, so she went to go see it. Her friend lived with substance dealers. Cops raided the place, and she was arrested along with the 12 guys that were in the house. They all would have been charged with felonies if the 2 substance dealers hadn't written their names on the bags of green herb. The best part of this story was that the raid happened on the 20th of April. I love college towns. She was still charged with a misdemeanor for possession, by the way, but she kinda got off light. The narrator hopes that the last part only happened because she actually had a bag of the wacky tobacco on her, and not just because she happened to live in the same place. Who knows though, I guess. Georgia State Penitentiary. Was hospitalized over my court date. Social workers took care of it, supposedly. I got back to work at the Air Force and I had a bench warrant out for me. It told me to show up at Georgia State Penn at 5 a.m. I thought I was getting a new court date. Nope. I got a roommate in cell block D. Didn't get to talk to a lawyer until the next day. After a brief conversation, I was released by the warden. And that's how I learned not to drive like an idiot. But at least I can say I've been to prison. Not on my record, luckily. I got fired while on paid vacation leave to spend the weekend celebrating my 21st birthday. I got home from the bar at around 3 a.m. Woke up at 4 a.m. because my phone is ringing. Conversation went like this. Hello? Mr. Drunk Man, it's your boss. We need you to come in at 6 to help open. No one else will do it. Boss, I just got home from the bar. I'm still drunk. Just until 9. We just need you until 9. I'm drunk. It's my birthday weekend. I asked off months ago. But no one else will come in. I'm drunk and on vacation. Please, Drunk Man, please. Oh my god, for frick's sake, just till 9? Just until 9. Fine, I'll get up and take a shower and call a cab. Thank you. See you at 6. I opened the bakery department and as an added surprise, the coffee bar, which I wasn't trained to do, and I worked both departments alone for 2 hours serving customers. 9 a.m. rolls around and the boss calls me into the back office as I'm clocking out and fires me on the spot for being at work smelling like vodka and asks me to clean out my locker. Looking back, I was supposed to get my annual raise 4 days later and she knew I'd be drunk. She set me up to work 3 hours so she didn't have to give me a raise. I was working retail and had 2 weeks left until school started again, and I was quitting. This lady let her kid go number 2 on the floor in a clothing rack. My manager approached me and told me the situation and said I was to clean it up. I responded with, I have 4 days left here, I'll quit right now. You don't pay me enough for that. She laughed and said she'd figured I'd say something like that, then we both laughed. Then she said she'd find someone who actually needed the job to do it. I'm a teacher. I was sick and thought I could make it through a school day, but I was miserable. I went to the office to arrange a sub. On the way back to my room to get my car keys, I saw 2 students loitering outside the library. I tried to keep my head down and my ears closed, but as I walked by, one said to the other, Man, I'm gonna frickin' murder that kid with his pencil when I see him. He could have just said anything else and I'd have kept walking. Alas. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I stopped by a friend's house. It turns out that was the day the police decided to come and arrest him and search his house. I was on my way out the door when they arrived. I was in the Coast Guard and I had to cover for someone on my day off. Well, the night before was my friend's last day, so we threw down and partied. Normally, when you stand by for someone, it's common courtesy from the other crew to basically give you the day off, unless you're really needed. So I said, screw it. Well, I was hungover on the rec desk, trying not to die, and a pipe goes through that a body had been reported, and they called the crew to make preps and put me on there. The absolute jerks. It turned out to be 4 bloated bodies that had been gotten to by sharks and other fish. Worst smell I've ever smelled. Got back to the station and had to throw away the uniform I was wearing. That sucked, but not as much as CISM afterwards. That's basically when they sit you down with a chaplain and make you talk about what you've just witnessed immediately after you've witnessed said thing, with little to no time to process. It supposedly helps, but it for damn sure didn't help me. Last summer, there was this rugby tournament in my hometown. Since I play rugby while at college and my team is participating, I decided to go visit and watch the games. I originally had been unavailable, which is why I wasn't signed up. Anyways, it's a 7s tournament, but they have an injured player after the first game and are down to 6 for the next one. So in order to keep playing, they need another player. They watch me on the sidelines and ask me to play. So you remember that my intention was to come and watch some rugby? Well, too bad. Now I'm borrowing someone's cleats and mouthguard to play rugby in jeans. Jeans. Despite that, though, we still played really well. I was working night security at a hotel at the time. My co-worker and relief got bit by a spider and had necrosis, so I was called in while he was rushed to the ER. An hour into my shift, the entire half of the town lost power, including the hotel. It was in the middle of summer in 100 degrees plus Fahrenheit, and at night it reached the upper 80 degrees if you were lucky. The hotel was 100% full and the parking lot was pitch black. During this time, some dudes on bikes decided to come around and try to break into some cars. I had to chase them off, and one of them got brave and tried to fight me, and I had to tase him. His friends carried him off. I walked circles around the hotel for 5 hours before power came back. I wasn't even supposed to be there that week. You know, it seems to the narrator like this story can only have come from Australia. There are just too many little telltale signs there, starting with the venomous spider bite. Why do you all live down there? I got called into work one day back when I was working customer service. The girl that had been working that day was in a car crash on the way into work, so I wasn't upset about coming in, just worried for her. Anyway, not 5 minutes after I arrived and clocked in, a lady who looked homeless and absolutely reeked of body odor came in. I worked at a members-only wholesale store, so you had to pay $45 flat fee before you could purchase a single item from the store. This lady came in, wandered around for a minute or two, and then made her way to the counter. Thus started the most bizarre exchange I think I've ever had at a retail store. She said,
"Do you sell animals?"
"No, this is a wholesale store."
"Y'all don't sell chickens? What about just chicks?"
"Nope, neither of those. We do sell eggs, but they're unfertilized."
Well, do you sell cabbage and hot dogs?"
"You bet. Do you have a membership? I'll be glad to set you up and get you ready to shop."
"Oh no, I couldn't possibly. I gotta save my bucks for chickens and hot dogs. Can't have one without the other, or the cabbage. I'll try Walmart, I guess. You think they have chickens there? They probably do. I'll go there and
she ambled away while still talking, clearly no longer talking to me, and left the store. I'll never forget you, crazy lady, and the way you had lipstick smeared all around your mouth. Also, the girl who got in a wreck was fine, but received a broken arm and a new car from the other driver's insurance for her trouble. I had one, very recently in fact. I was at work, doing very little, like full-screen games little, and my boss walked up to us. He asked if I could go and cover the IT help desk as someone had gone home sick. It's not my job, I'm a server admin, but I'm still in internal IT and couldn't really say no because I was playing games at work. Oh gosh, the amount of grief I got from people. My whole day was spent saying, "I don't know how to do that, I'm not even supposed to be here today." Most people were fine, a few thought I was new, but there were some real jerks. I don't know how those help desk guys do it. It's hard work and you meet some real idiots, even though it's a huge IT company. This is long, but bear with me. I offered to cover on a day I don't normally work, so my coworker could spend some time with her family across the state. It was also the day we were training a new girl. I walk in and one of the other coworkers there starts filling me in on the day before. Apparently, the new hire was all over the map and kept going to the bathroom for 20 or 30 minutes at a time, multiple times, over a 6-hour shift. It was a doctor's office and we opened for the day. Half day, so opening at 1. And she's not here. Not exactly the best impression when you're still training. Half an hour goes by and she says she's walking there and starts rambling. She lives literally a block and a half from the office, so I don't know what she's talking about. My coworker pulls her aside and said she can't keep taking super long breaks unless she has medical problems or stomach issues. She gets it, completely understands, and apologizes. Then she takes off her blazer and reveals the worst outfit I've ever seen for work. It was a romper that somehow showed off her butt and her chest at the same time, whilst also looking dirty like she found it on the floor. She's talking like crazy and can't be quiet or focus on anything. Highlights during the few hours she was there: she stroked a patient's butt cheek and thigh because she wanted to see if her leggings felt as soft as they looked. She flirted with a man that was 70 and married, and when he didn't respond physically, she grabbed him and tried to force herself on him. She said she needed to get something from her boyfriend real quick, parked in our back lot for 30 minutes where no one could see her. When she came back from her parking lot escapades, her entire personality was mellow and dropping until she just stopped functioning. She just stared catatonically at the computer screen for 40 minutes while we discussed what to do about her. We ended up making an excuse and having the doctors tell her to leave. As she left, she went to say goodbye to one of the doctors and was slurring her words, and for some reason, at 5:30 in the evening told him, "Bye, have good mornings," and then left. She then called me multiple times at the office, sobbing because she was fired. It was uncomfortable, and I wasn't even supposed to be the one working that day. In short, filled in and ended up training a girl who was high out of her mind. Did not have good mornings after that. Well, in my manager and team leader roles, I've witnessed some pretty disastrous first days in my time, but never any as bad as this. What substance do we think she was on? Smack? That poor girl needs help in any case. I used to make custom leather accessories for motorcycles and once worked on a Saturday to catch up on special orders. A couple came in for a tank bra for the wife's bike. Turns out I knew the husband for years and the new wife was the CPA for a development company looking for an assistant. And that's how I'm not even supposed to be here today turned into a much better paying job about 10 minutes away from home with excellent benefits. I was visiting federal prison for a community event, and after it was over, there was time to visit with the inmates. Well, me and a friend were about to leave to go and get lunch, but since my co-worker was there, I thought to invite her. She was all the way in the back of the room, but before we could make ourselves back to the door, there was a lockdown. We were stuck there, hungry and without any news, for over 2 hours. After we got out, I heard in the news that an inmate had escaped. In short, I was in a lockdown in a federal prison because I thought to invite my co-worker to lunch. Worked at McDonald's in high school. A manager called me and asked me to work a breakfast shift on Saturday morning. I figured, sure, the manager was pretty cool and I'd be out of there in a few hours. They have me taking orders and money at the back drive-thru window. Car pulled up and it was this old lady. We had the strangest conversation I've had at that place and it went, "Welcome to McDonald's, blah blah blah. I'm sure we all know how it goes." "Hello. Do you know you're a virgin?" Me, who's not a virgin but have to be nice, so I said, "I am?" "Yes. I'm a virgin, you're a virgin, we're all virgins." I was getting curious now. "Okay, how do you know all of this?" "The people told me. They're all around us and they know we're virgins." "Oh well, that's good that you told me." "They had a meeting and we're going to the place for the virgins." "Oh, that's great, but you've got to order now." "Oh, I'll have a tea." She then pulled forward and proceeded to have the exact same conversation with me again at the window. Asked for the manager and told her about the new virgin vacation spot as well. It was this old lady and all the makeup she had on was hot pink. I was cast in a play, quit, and then blackmailed into coming back and doing the show by the crazy choreographer. I found out years later the director had no clue and he apologized to me. The night I came in for my first forced rehearsal, I saw a drunk guy get hit and killed by a car outside the rehearsal space. I was a small child in a stroller. My mum was rushing down the stairs and was too slow and the doors in the front carriage closed in her face and she missed the train. A few minutes later, the train crashed. 43 people died and most of them were from the front couple of carriages. Google the Moorgate tube crash if you want to be traumatized. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.